changes to the official agenda I would like to propose, first off, with so many people here, I believe many of them in response to the zoning requests we have before us, I would like to move item B1, the public hearing regarding the P&Z item RZ09-02, after citizens' comments, so as to allow the people that have come here for that to have the discussion and then leave early on.
Now, to clarify, are you proposing to move consideration of the matter along with the public hearing?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any objection to that revision? Any objection to moving item B1 underneath citizen comments? I guess that would be a new Roman numeral 7 and renumbered. Okay.
Mayor, I would also like to propose to change the wording on board business, items B and D, back to the original wording that was given for them, for the reason that when we come up to those particular agenda items, any member of the Board of Aldermen may decide they need to make a motion. Also, after discussion, there may or may not even be a motion in regards to any of those items. And so I think it would be a little more clearer if we just refer to what we're discussing and not specifying a particular motion or candidate to make a motion.
And to clarify, that is a motion from Alderman Dumas. Both of those are motions made on the agenda by Alderman Dumas. Alderman Dumas, do you object?
I do not object.
Okay, so those will,
The original wording was for B, consideration of the adoption of the amended board policy regarding travel by board members and city employees. And item D was consideration of calling for public hearing on amending the city of Starkville Code of Ordinances, Chapter 10, Town Hall Beverages. And with the exception of enumerating items for consent agenda, those are the only changes I have to the official agenda.
okay, are there any objections? Any objections to the previous changes? Okay, and now, do you want to move into your proposals for consent?
I'd like to propose the following items for approval on a consent agenda. The first one being number 9, mayor's business, item C, request for travel. Next one will be under C, office of the city clerk, item number 3. E, electric department.
Hold on, I'm behind.
Authorization to advertise for letters of interest for election.
Where is that?
Alderman Corey, would you like to add those other two items, or you don't want to add those to consent, items 1 and 2 for city clerk?
1, but 2 will have to have a review before.
Okay, that's right. Item 1, you would?
I have no objections.
Okay, item 1, okay, very good.
So C1 and 3.
Okay, so C1 and C3. Under E, electric department, items 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
F, engineering and streets, item 1. Unless there are any questions or any need for discussion on that item. H, personnel, item 1. Police department, items 1 and 2. And J, public services, items 1 and 2. lastly, item K, sanitation department, unless there's any questions, item 1.
Okay, Alderman Corey, I have your proposed revision to move the following items to the consent agenda. Item 9C, and item 11C1 and 11C3, item 11E1, item 11E2, item 11E3, item 11F1, item 11H1, item 11I1, item 11I2, item 11J1, item 11J2, item 11K1. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Are there any, is there any objection to moving those items to the consent agenda? Any objection? Any objection? Any further revisions? Any further revisions?
No.
Okay, seeing none, are there any other proposed revisions or a motion to approve the agenda as revised is in order?
Move approval of the official agenda as revised.
Motion to approve the agenda as revised has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? This measure passes. The agenda's been approved. Okay, next order of business is the approval of the minutes for the June 30th, 2009 meeting. I do have one note before I entertain a motion to approve, and I would just like it reflected in the record that everything pertaining to items 8 through 10 in the minutes from the June 30th meeting were subsequently vetoed. And that's just a note for the record so that it'll be in the next minutes. Is there a motion to approve or amend the June 30th, 2009 minutes?
I move we approve.
Motion has been made to approve the June 30th, 2009 minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? This measure passes. Okay. We'll now move into comments by the mayor. And we have new employees that we'd like to introduce. There is an error for those of you that are working off of a written agenda. Cap Riley is actually the new equipment operator at the landfill. We'd also like to recognize police officers who have recently completed the Mississippi Law Enforcement Officers Training Academy in Pearl. That was completed on June 25th, 2009, and the... Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Mayor and Board, these are our 4 latest recruits in the Mississippi Law Enforcement Officers Training Academy, and they all 4 graduated at the top of their class with special honors. It pleases me to also be able to tell you that Officer Jimmy Thomas graduated first in his class overall. The next to him is Officer Jeremy Bell, who graduated top of his class overall in firearms. Officer Kenneth Watkins beside him also graduated in the top 10 percentile of his class. And Officer Fred Smith, Rick, some of you don't forget. Fred Smith graduated 3rd in his class overall in firearms as well. So this is a class of over 55 people from all over the state. It's 10 weeks of very rigorous training at the Law Enforcement Academy at Pearl. And for them to have attained this number of honors for that class is an unusual and rare event. So I just wanted to recognize them and present them to you. So thank you, gentlemen, very much, and congratulations once again.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'll recognize citizens who wish to make a comment for 3 minutes.
Alderman Board first. Mr. Mayor, to the Board of Aldermen, to Ms. Trump. The veto that you made it raised a lot of eyebrows because of after the old board had moved the Park and Recreation back to advisory committee, and you vetoed it from autonomous committee to advisory committee, and you vetoed it. It raised a lot of eyebrows because it questioned our credibility, where we going, and because of you asked us to observe all the department heads for 90 days, and after you turned that chief, the commissioner, Park Commission to advisory committee, that made him to be a department head, and so it raised a lot of eyebrows, wondering, questioning our credibility. Do we know what we're doing? Because it felt like that he should have been up under the same 90-day observation as the other department heads.
Well, I guess to speak to a couple of different points, this gives me, I guess, an opportunity to clarify my veto. And I made the veto of that measure that was passed by the previous board for a couple of different reasons. First of all, while I recognize there are some structural issues that need to be reconciled with the current system, I thought the threats posed by eliminating an autonomous parks commission outweighed concerns there. I do want to see us move forward to work to alleviate any concerns about how the park system is operating. The most urgent concern was that due to the way that legislation enabling the 2% tax was adopted and referring specifically to a parks commission, I felt that our ability to collect a portion of that revenue that's going to the parks could have been undermined by acting in that capacity. Now, as far as, I guess with respect to employees and department heads being retained for a 90-day period, that was a board action. Actually, probably not consistent with my stance. I said from the outset of being elected that I thought 6 months was an appropriate period for the board to get to know current personnel and make decisions accordingly. The board ultimately opted in its initial approval of all personnel positions to go with a 90-day period. However, the important thing to note, and the parks personnel is in a little different situation because they actually serve under the Parks Commission. But with respect to other employees in the city, every employee in this city serves at the will and the pleasure of the board. So on any given night, it is y'all's decision to determine, how personnel decisions should be made. So I guess that's I hope helpful explanation as to why I made the decision about the parks veto and how that relates to personnel decisions that y'all made subsequently. Alderman Ball.
The 2% revenue, if we go back, will we lose?
There's a chance, and I'm not comfortable with the risk being there. I can defer the matter to the city attorney, but I can also tell you, basically what the issue is, and that is, and what I'll do is I'll explain it, and then I'll let him clean up if I said anything wrong. The way that money is, or the beneficiary of that 40% of the money is defined, is an actual parks commission, and a parks commission is a creature of statute in Mississippi. There is a special enabling statute that allows you to have an independent parks commission. So I think, from a legal perspective, that there is real concern that once you eliminate that body, you no longer have a legitimate body there to receive the revenue. Now, that's my thought, but we have a city attorney that interprets these things, so I defer to him as well.
I think that's an excellent explanation of what the problem is. I couldn't add anything to that.
Is there further discussion, comments by board members? I guess we're in the period of comments. Further comments? Okay, we'll now move to citizen comments. And anyone wishing to speak, please identify yourself and you'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening to the mayor and board. My name is Alvin Turner, from Ward 7. Alderman Vaughn is my Alderman.
Thank you.
The citizens, they are very displeased with some things that have happened. The 90 days for all city employees, they feel very upset about that. They feel like that if the employees have to be put on a 90-day thing, they feel like that, that makes them very uncomfortable. So, they very unpleased with that. So, let's be careful, because you can make a lot of things be where people will feel like that they can't trust, the decision that is made. Alcohol on Sunday. That makes it feel like that. It can be more raping, more fighting, more everything. And we got police, but our alcohol on Sunday is not going to help. So let us be careful at what we do and how we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Further citizen comments? Are there any further citizen comments? Seeing none, your agenda has been reordered to consider the matter that was previously 11B1, and that is the consideration to approve a P&Z item number RZ0902, a request by B&P Developers of Mississippi LLC for a zoning change from C2, general business, to R3A, single family, medium density, located on the south side of Academy Road, east of Hummingbird Lane in Ward 3. Mr. Griffith, do you have a presentation for us?
Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Mayor.
Yes.
Mayor, I feel, although I'm no longer a partial owner in B&P Developers, and have not been in over 4 months, I feel like I need to recuse myself from anything that comes before the board that involves them at this time.
Okay. You can leave the room. And Mr. Griffith, if you'll just give Alderman Parker a second.
Yes, sir.
And begin when he's out of the room. Mr. Griffith?
Mayor and Board, for the record, item RZ09-02 is a request by B&P Developers of Mississippi for a zoning change from C2 General Business to R3A Single Family Medium Density. The subject property is located on the south side of Academy Road, east of Hummingbird Lane in Ward 3. The rezoning will affect approximately 12.7 acres of land. The applicant has stated that he would like to develop the property as a residential subdivision of single-family detached homes, but has not submitted a preliminary plat for review. The medium-density residential land use would allow a maximum gross density of 8 dwelling units per acre, or 101 units for the 12.7-acre site. A conceptual plat was mailed to adjacent property owners showing a net density of 63 units for the site, or approximately 4.96 dwelling units per acre. For comparison, the net density of the detached single-family portion of the Academy Place development is approximately 4.39 dwelling units per acre, based on 56 units on 12.77 acres of land. Also, the Stonegate subdivision is a low-density residential development of approximately 6.3 acres with 26 single-family lots, yielding a net density of approximately 1.6 dwelling units per acre. There are 2 statutory reasons for amending the official zoning map: an error in the ordinance or zoning map, or a change in area conditions. The staff report listed several zoning changes which have occurred in recent years. Beginning with the rezoning of the Academy Place property from C2 to PUD in 2001, the Old Charleston Cottages property from C2 to R5 in 2007, the Maison DeVille property from R1 to R3 in 2007, and the Box Avenue development property from C1 to R4 in 2008. All of these rezonings were based on changing conditions in the area. Reference was made during the P&Z public hearing about Frank Jones' Old Town Center commercial building currently under construction on Academy Road, and this project was actually approved in 2005. In December of 2004, that same site had been considered for a Dollar General store. A public hearing for a special use exception was held, and the area residents were adamantly opposed to the intended use of the property, citing, among other things, noise, traffic, and displeasure of a retail store backing up to Starkville Academy. After denial, the Dollar General store was built around the corner at its present location on Louisville Street. 44 property owners of record within 160 feet of the subject property were notified directly by mail of the request. A public hearing was published in the June 25th edition of the Starkville Daily News, and 2 placards were posted on the site concurrent with the notice. The P&Z conducted a public hearing which lasted over 2 hours, in which the residents of Stonegate and Academy Place and their attorney voiced their opposition to the rezoning request. Petitions and other materials were distributed to the P&Z commissioners, and copies have been provided in your packets along with draft meeting minutes summarizing the hearing. The P&Z recommended approval of the request based on a change in conditions in the neighborhood by a 3-1 vote, with 2 members absent from the meeting. In accordance with Appendix A, Article 4, Section B4 of the City's Code of Ordinances, any person aggrieved by the P&Z recommendation may request a public hearing before the Mayor and Board of Aldermen. This same section requires that in instances where a proposed change in the zoning ordinance has been protested by 20% or more of the property owners within the area of the proposed rezoning, or within 160 feet of the property proposed for rezoning, such amendment shall not become effective except by favorable vote of 2/3 of all members of the Mayor and Board of Aldermen. This is a public hearing, so at this time I need to ask the board members if any of them have been contacted by anyone regarding the rezoning request.
Raise your hand if you've been contacted.
I'll entertain any questions that the members have, and I know there's representatives here for both the applicant and for the homeowners association.
Without objection, I think it may be more efficient if we move through the public hearing and then have questions. Is there any objection to doing it that way? Okay. At this time, a public hearing on this matter has been requested by numerous parties. And in the interest of time and fairness, I'm going to establish a public hearing with the following format. Those wishing to speak in favor of the proposed zoning change will be afforded a total of 15 minutes to speak, and those wishing to oppose the proposed zoning change will be afforded a total of 15 minutes to speak. Now, I have received, as has the board, numerous written comments and arguments about this issue. I would like to briefly summarize what has been distributed to the board as of 1 o'clock today. And that is letters against the proposed zoning change from Betty O'Neill, Priscilla Boyd, Mary Bradway, Ken Stringer, John Gaskin, some of these are duplicates, William Monroe, Tim Barnett, Nelson Douglas, Bobby Fleming, Ruth and Ernest Meyer, Robert Boyd, Tommy Parker, Mildred and Alan Stickley, and General Lipscomb. There was also one letter submitted by Jerry and Libby Gill in favor of the proposed zoning recommendation. The board, many of them were emailed directly, and they've also been distributed, the entire packet of that correspondence. So that will be there in addition to the official packet for consideration. I would ask if we can take a moment without it getting too chaotic, if those wishing to speak in favor of the proposed zoning request and those wishing to speak against could gather amongst yourselves and just decide how you would like to allocate your time. And if you're ready, you can just nod. Is there anybody that's not ready? Okay. And now those who are speaking for the proposed zoning request, would you please tell me how you would like to allocate your time?
I'm Johnny Moore, attorney for the applicants, and I'll be doing the speaking.
You're going to use the entirety of the 15 minutes?
Could I use 5 minutes at the end of the other parties?
Would you like to go 10 and 5?
To address some of their concerns.
Okay. So we'll go 10, 15, then 5?
10 or 15 and 5 would be plenty of time.
Okay. Now, those wishing to speak against, could the parties that are going to speak please raise your hand? Okay. And how would you like your time allocated?
I need 5 minutes, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Gaskin will take the rest. If we can hold 2 minutes to address his issues.
Is that okay? Okay. All right.
At this point, let me make a motion, or let me.
And could you state your name? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, John Creason.
Okay.
I represent the homeowners association.
Okay.
At this point, for the purpose of making a record, I want to raise again our objection to meeting, to not postponing this meeting to a later date, which prejudices us in our.
Okay. I'd rather you do that in your official comment, so it'll be part of the record. Now, the time allocation issue. It's fine with me if you.
It's not the time allocation.
Okay.
It's the timing of the hearing.
I understand. So you would like a total of 10 and 5, but you want 2 at the end. So you want 8, 5 and 2?
No, we want 5.
Probably about 6 to 7. I'll gladly give the remainder of mine if I run short, if that's fine.
Let me do this. I'll take 6 minutes and he can take the rest and he can respond to anything in this.
Okay, so 6 and the rest, and you'll reserve your remaining time for rebuttal to their rebuttal.
Exactly.
Okay. You have that? Basically, 10 and 5, and then 6 from Mr. Breezy. Okay, Mr. Moore, 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor and Board of Aldermen. Mr. Frank Brewer, one of the members of the LLC, and I'm gonna make this brief because I know that you've been provided a complete packet of information that was part of the Planning and Zoning Commission's information, and I'm sure you've been inundated with all kinds of materials since then. And I know you can read and fathom all that information, so it's really not that much that I can add to it. I had an old preacher tell me one time, I went to talk to him, and he says, you ought to be able to tell me what you need in a couple of minutes. He said the Sermon on the Mount was only 1 minute, 15 seconds, and the Gettysburg Address was about 2 minutes. He says, so I don't think you have anything any more important than that to tell me, so, get it done. So, in that respect, I would ask that Ben's staff report be in its entirety considered part of our report, and presentation, that also that the minutes of the Planning and Zoning Commission's meeting where they said that this matter, they recommended this matter be approved, be a part of the record as well. And then I'm just gonna summarize a few of the things that I think have brought us to this point. Initially, an application was made approximately a year ago to have this property rezoned from C2 to R3. And there was quite an outcry against it, primarily because the residents were concerned that we would have duplexes, triplexes, multifamily type situations next to their R1 zoning and the Academy Place residents. So the prior board, as an accommodation to that situation, decided we needed a new classification. So out of this was birthed this R3A idea that we can have a category within the R3 that just addresses single-family residences. So we don't have the concerns that, would be legitimate, that you could have multifamily type situations there. So the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended that. It was unanimously approved by the board, and that's why we're back here. Now, as part of the analysis for rezoning, there's a requirement that there to be a change in conditions, and those changes have to meet certain criteria. In Ben's report on page 3, there's notations that this proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan. It lists items 1 through 6. I'm not gonna read those to you because they've been provided to you, and I believe you can fathom that. Those items do meet all the criteria. Then on page 4, the matter of land use compatibility. The Stonegate subdivision is zoned R1, which allows 4 units per acre. The Academy Place subdivision has a net density of 4.39 units per acre, which is 56 units on 12.77 acres. Our initial drawing, which has been provided to you, along with some outside elevation floor plans, to give you an idea of what our thinking is, would put us at 63 lots on 12.7 acres, which is 4.96 dwelling units per acre. So that would make us consistent with what's around us. 4 to 5 units per acre would put us with what residential area already exists in the development, which would classify all 3 of these projects as medium-density residential land uses, which is what we're trying to do, be consistent with what's around us. Now, the other criteria is there has to be changed conditions. This is the absolute last piece of Zone C2 property south of Academy Road. Everything else has been, is no longer Zone C2. And actually, the Academy Place residents are beneficiaries of a zoning change to a PUD, which is why they're living there. They were beneficiaries of a change. The changes that we have seen and that Ben has recognized that are consistent with what we're trying to do are the Mason DeVille property, which was a rezoning change from R1 to R3, the Box Avenue property, which is immediately south of the Lutheran Church, which was rezoned from C1 to R4. Then Old Charleston Cottages, just north of Academy Road, was originally C2 and it was rezoned to R5. It's all the multicolored homes across behind the Farm Bureau building. So we think all those changes are an indication that the property zoning and use is changing from commercial to residential. And another good indication of this is this property's been zoned commercial for quite a long period of time. It's been on the market 10 to 12 years. It hadn't sold. That's an indication that, hey, this is not the highest and best use of this property, which is what we're trying to do and make it consistent with what adjoins it. Now, another matter is there adequate public facilities, which Ben addresses, and there is. Is there any environmental concerns? There, according to Ben's report, there are none. The economic effect, well, there were comments made about the economy's bad and they don't need to be doing this, and you know, in a bad economic climate, anybody that will step out and conduct business, kudos to them. They're entitled to their day, and I believe that they're gonna add, if you take these 60, let's just say 60 lots, 200,000 per house, it's $12 million to the tax base. If we're gonna continue to, time's up.
No. You've got 5 minutes more, and then of course your 5 minutes for a vote.
Okay, all right. If we're gonna continue to add, if we're gonna continue to add city services, continue to try to improve our facilities like municipal complexes and police stations, we're gonna have to continue to add to our tax base. And this is, I call it reasonable economic development. And I think this is a reasonable way to do it. We're gonna increase our tax base, we're gonna put people to work, and there are builders and contractors with nothing to do, framers, plumbers, they need work. And this is an orderly way to do it. Also, we're required to follow all the city's land development and subdivision regulations, which we will do. There's concerns about traffic. All you can say is if you're gonna live on South Montgomery, you need to be prepared to deal with the traffic. That's just a fact of life. As far as public need, we presented data in your reports from realtors that cite everything from the houses listed to the houses sold, the price per square foot, the absorption rates, all the data that indicates that the houses in this price range, from the 100 to 200,000 price range, that's what's selling in Starkville. 57 to 60% of the houses that have sold in Starkville the last 2 years are in that price range, which means that's where the business is. And these houses are all selling in under 6 months. If they sell in under 6 months, it is a seller's market. So if you're gonna be in a depressed real estate market, you need to be selling in a price range where you've got a seller's market. Also in Ben's report, it recites a public need. We get numerous calls, they get numerous calls on people looking for houses in that price range and locations. And in conclusion, I'm gonna cite Ben's report. It says, based on his findings and facts and conclusions and investigations in his staff report, this request is consistent with the Mississippi Code requirements for a change and the city's code of ordinances. And like I said, we adopt his report. We also, adopt, or for your information, the minutes of that meeting that they conclude by a 3-1 vote that it met the criteria. If you have any questions, I'll take them now, or I'll take them when I come back.
Let's save questions for everybody until the end.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Creasy, 6 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is John Creasy. I live in Ward 1 of the city, and I'm representing the Academy Place Homeowners Association. I don't want to take up a whole lot of time on this, but John Gaspard is also going to sit up here with me. He's with the Homeowners Association, and he will fill out the ballots at the time. I wanted to we've handed out quite a few handouts, and there are different materials in there that I think are important for the aldermen to take a look at. Just so that you'll know what the background of this is, 1 year ago, This matter came up before planning and zoning, and it was denied, went before the Board of Aldermen and was denied a year ago. There's been no change in circumstances in this area since that time, other than the building of 2 commercial buildings on the other side of the road and back to the west. With all due deference to Mr. Griffith, we just think his conclusions are wrong. This action for rezoning was unwarranted. It's not supported by the facts, and it constitutes basically a spot zoning of this property. The only issues that are legitimately before the board are changing the character of the neighborhood and an established need for the requested zoning classification. We've got materials in there provided by an MAI appraiser that deals with actual houses selling in the area, not just conceptual houses all over the entire town, about houses in this price range. There may or may not be a demand for this housing. In any event, there is no legitimate reason to place most of the housing in this price range in one part of the city where the streets are already overtaxed, there are water issues because of the development, and those matters. We think that there has not been a change in this neighborhood in the past year or in the past recent history, simply because along the road on both sides, on everything past this piece of property, everything along the road is zoned commercial. The piece sought to be rezoned as C2, but everything else is C1. You can read the materials we brought, and a lot of it is covered in there. I will make one other point to you. There are general principles of zoning that apply to this as well. Orderly development and protection of existing neighborhoods. And I don't think these were taken into account by P&Z. They were taken into account last year. One final thing that I need to address. James Hicks, one of the commissioners, a year ago recused himself from the hearing because of a business relationship with the proponents. He did not do so this year. I believe when the recusal took place last year, it was based on the fact that he was working or is working for the company that had done the plats. While those plats were not attached this year as they were last year, the proponents in passing out materials in the neighborhood used a site plan that we assume was prepared by them. And we think Mr. Hicks should have recused himself. It's made worse by the fact that he was the party that seconded the motion. Now, I would also like to renew our request for postponement of this thing. We think we're prejudiced by it, and just for the matter of making a record, I'll bring that up now. I will defer to my colleague for the rest of that part of the time.
Thank you.
Mr. Gaskin, you've got a total of 9 minutes. Whatever you don't use may be reserved for rebuttal.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you all for your time. Less than a year ago, we sat before the Board of Aldermen discussing this same rezoning issue. Our opposition to this proposed rezoning is founded on the same basis now as then. No change has occurred in the area to warrant this request. The proposed density allowed by both the R3 and R3A zoning designations is not appropriate for the property and the neighborhood. The only difference between R3 and R3A is that R3A construction can't have common walls, so no duplexes, triplexes. That's it. The request would allow 8 houses constructed on a single acre. Just as the city planner said tonight, that's a maximum of 101 homes that could be developed on the subject property. This is twice the existing density in Stonegate and Academy Place. Nothing in the neighborhood has changed to justify this type of zoning next to existing neighborhoods with such low densities. Rezoning the property has twice been denied by the city of Starkville. Last year, planning and zoning overwhelmingly denied the petitioner's request. The Board of Aldermen also denied the request. We say no material change has happened, was found then, and obviously nothing has happened since then other than new commercial development on Academy Road and the changes in our commissions and boards. That's all that's changed in a one-year period. Planning and zoning just heard our arguments and decided to recommend approval of this request. Just as our attorney just stated, we feel very strongly this was a flawed process and it tarnishes the recommendation made. One commission member, Mr. Hicks, recused himself from the vote last year because his firm did the plat work on this very same property for Mr. Brewer. This year he chose to vote. The plat work is prepared and attached in the minutes and in the city planner's report. This year, 2 commissioners were absent from the vote. The commission chair could not vote, and Mr. Hicks should not have voted. This leaves 3 eligible commissioners. We just feel that Mr. Hicks should have abstained from this so that we could have a fair hearing in planning and zoning. Mr. James Quinn, an MAI certified appraiser, was unable to attend tonight due to the short time frame, but he did prepare a report that you have in your records. He defines the neighborhood as Academy Road from Louisville Street to South Montgomery Street. This commercial corridor, which the property fronts, is loaded with commercial establishments. All new frontage development has been commercial. No residential developments front Academy Road, period. They are all well off the road behind a buffer of commercial property. All land from Louisville Street to the proposed property is commercially zoned, as is the subject property itself. All frontage land on the opposite side of the street is either zoned commercially or used commercially. All of the land behind the property is zoned R1 or PUD with a density half that that's being proposed tonight. How has this neighborhood changed to justify this rezoning of commercial land to a residential zoning that's twice that we have in our neighborhoods? It simply hasn't. It would be a travesty to allow the stack and pack construction methods of years past to occur again in Starkville. As a former banker, I watched home values plummet when row houses were built over on Stark Road. There's nothing to prevent this from happening here. With this zoning category, it would allow for that. With the price of the land and the problems on the land, this is the only way they'll be able to return a profit is stack and pack. We have 2 streams converging on the property, and per the city planner's report last year, the stream that bisects the area is listed on the USGS quadrangle map that serves a 100-acre drainage area. There have been flooding issues in this area experienced in Stonegate. Imagine what it's going to be like with up to 101 more homes providing watershed into this area that already has problems. A local wetlands expert has surveyed the area on Stonegate side of the property and found evidence to support this may be a wetland area. That information is, I believe, in your packet. It's just not appropriate to allow the construction of 8 houses per acre in a drainage area such as this. Our city engineer cited that this should have a 25-foot no disturb area, so we feel it should be left alone. The topography is a major problem because we sit higher than the proposed property, and several homes in Academy Place do. There's concerns with the quality of life posed by the traffic and safety concerns. The petitioners cite sales data to support their opinion that there's a need for this change. Their statistics are flawed. Looking at citywide data versus the data in the area, there's no comparison. Out of all that, there were only 6 houses listed from the exact area, and some of them in our neighborhood's been on sale for a year. So it's our stance that 85% of Academy Place and Stonegate are opposed to this, and since I probably have 2 minutes left, I'm gonna cut mine short where I have time to respond to others.
Thank you, Mr. Gadsden. Thank you, Mr. Creasy. Mr. Moore, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not gonna need that much time. Number one, this is not the same application as was presented a year ago. That was a request for an R3. This is an R3A, which entirely different zoning, which we have no R3A in Starkville. This is a case of first impression. I know they seem to be concerned about stormwater drainage. Well, we do have a stormwater ordinance they've got, which they are gonna be required to follow, so that will address that issue. And if it were to stay commercial, they would still have to deal with the stormwater ordinance and the issues involving that. And as a general principle, commercial runoff from commercial developments is more severe than from residential development. There's been a comment made additionally about Mr. Quinn, who is a MAI appraiser, and not to criticize his report, but if you're an appraiser, you're required to follow certain standards, and if you put that designation on anything that relates to appraised values and comparables and absorption rates, you're supposed to have data and statistics on individual units. There's no information, it's all generalities, so you can't rely on that report. The information that we provided you was direct data from sales and comparables, which we would refer you to. One thing and this property is never gonna move as C2. There's way too much commercial property in Starkville now. When that bypass opened, all of that property is zoned C2. On the northeast portion of the bypass, there's a couple of tracts that are designated, I'd say, in the green areas, which are zoned agricultural. And those at some point will be C2. If you look at our zoning map, about 25% of everything in the city limits is zoned C2. So there's an abundance of it. And that's why they're not afraid of what might occur on C2, because it's not desirable. And it's not desirable because there are much better high traffic areas for commercial than we have here. And everything around this is on residential. This is not a place, Academy Road's not a destination place. I mean, you're not gonna go by places, you're not gonna go by there to go to Walmart and that sort of thing. So, it's just not a desirable place for commercial. There's been some concern voiced about what is this gonna do to the value of my residence. As a general appraisal rule, the value of new residences and new constructions brings up the value of the older surrounding areas. You don't see the opposite effect. Doesn't decrease the value of the properties. New construction always increases it. I drove through Academy Place the other day just out of curiosity to see, and it's a wonderful development, nice looking. There's 56 units in there, and there's only 3 for sale, which is a very, very small number. And that supports our position that there's a market for these type things. These people buy them, they keep them. And the last comment I have to make, and Ben hit on it a little bit, was the fact that the Old Town Village, at one point, they were trying to put a Dollar General there, which is commercial, and they all objected to that. So that leads me to believe whatever gets presented, it's not gonna be met with open arms, that it's gonna be objected to regardless. So, based on our initial presentation and addressing their issues, we would ask that this property be rezoned from C2 to R3A. Thank you very much.
Mr. Gaskin, 2 minutes.
2 minutes. First off, on the Old Town development, I've lived here 5 years. I didn't know what was proposed in '05. I did not go there. The homeowners association did not go there. I don't know who they're talking about who went to that. I think we have a record of working with developers. We worked with Charlie Morgan to move the Carpenter Place property forward, not stop it. We were unable to work with the developers on this last year. We made no implicit agreement to agree to this if it changed from R3 to R3A as cited. Last year, our argument was primarily against density, not that it was against apartments. One thing the petitioners may want to think about with the property not selling, perhaps it's because they're asking for $1.2 million for a piece of property that has a drainage problem in the middle of it. The fact is, the city planner said earlier, I think Stonegate subdivision has a density of 1.6 houses, and you're gonna put up to 8 houses per acre next to it. I don't care what the plat is that they're showing. They can ask for up to 8 houses per acre on it, and we have no guarantees of what's gonna happen there. So, that's just a real problem there that we have with it. We just want to protect the property around us. Academy Road is a destination corridor. You have Obies there, you have salons there that people come from all over town to go to. Academy Road is also a shortcut for everybody living on South Montgomery to get to Walmart. It is a pass-through to get to Walmart, to go through there. So with that, we just ask for you to take into consideration the whole picture. How many times do you hear residents coming in asking, I want commercial next to my house? We have a buffer with commercial that we won't have with what they're proposing. The creek that's in the middle of this, they're gonna have to work around that, meaning the smaller density requirement's gonna put it to the buffer. So I thank you for your time and ask you to deny.
Thank you, Mr. Gasson. Now, at this time, I think it will probably be helpful for the board to have the opportunity to ask questions of everybody that's made a presentation. To make this as orderly as possible, I ask that you please address your question either to someone specifically or to the group as a whole, and that includes.
We had some members of the association that had prior commitments that could not be, including Mr. Quinn, who's the MAI appraiser we referred to. We had hoped to allow him to speak. By skinning down the amount of time that we had to respond to this, we feel like that prejudiced us in our ability to prepare adequately and defend against this intrusive use.
But you agree with me, counsel, that you were given notice of the hearing? Is that correct?
I certainly would agree.
And you are the attorney for your clients, you're present, and we gave you an opportunity to be heard, right? Yeah, I just want to make sure I didn't leave that unanswered. I wanted to make sure I get a response. Mr. Griffith?
Yes, sir.
Will you come up front a minute? Will you come up to the table, please? I read all this material here, and you made a recommendation that there's been a change in condition. Would you just briefly restate that? I read it and I heard it, and just summarize your reason as to why there's a change in condition.
I cited the three most recent rezonings in the area, changing in the area conditions, and most of those were for more dense residential zonings. The whole area, or just about the entire area at one time when it was originally on the oldest zoning map that we have, showed it as C2. And I believe the first rezoning that occurred was for the Academy Place and Academy Village areas to be rezoned to PUD and to, for more dense zoning classifications.
About two or three more questions now. Is your recommendation, I read it, that there has, for this proposal to be approved, is that your recommendation? Is that your recommendation?
Yes, sir, based on the changes in the area.
Right, and Mr. Griffith, now, I was on this board last year when this application was denied, and is it your understanding that this new classification R3A was created stemming from that particular denial?
I was directed by the previous board to propose a new classification that was based on the R3 zoning that did not allow the multifamily uses.
Am I also correct, Mr. Griffith, that there are only three factors that we can consider as to whether the proposal for the rezoning should be granted? That's number one, is whether or not there was an error in the zoning classification. That's one factor. And you're not alleging an error, right?
Right, there's an error or a Scrivener's error, more commonly referred to.
Right, and the other factor is was there a change in condition? You're saying that it is your professional recommendation as a planner that there's a change in the zoning in the condition. That's what you're telling us?
Yes, sir, and that's why I cited the three most recent ones.
And also, I think we can also consider whether or not that there's a public need, if that was the case, right?
That's one of the criteria to
Yes.
review for the change, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. Further queries?
I got a few questions.
Alderman Davis.
Ben, we've got a allowable DU per acre of 8 dwelling units an acre.
Yes, sir, under medium density.
12 and that gets us about 101 dwelling units.
Gross.
Allowable? Gross.
Gross.
Mr. Brewer, is the most recent plat is what?
4.9, I believe it is. 4.96 is what I came up with.
With a, with a total build-out of what?
That's 63 units based on the conceptual plat.
Now, Mr. Kemp recommended a 25-foot buffer requirement for stormwater. Is there a mechanism within our current development review committee, our development review process, to where that can be a mandate, understanding that stormwater could be a potential issue here?
It would be if it was a site planning issue, like under a preliminary plat review and approval.
Does the current plat have that? And I know we're not at that, we're just at the zoning change, but, well, that's not even, back to the change in character, realizing that's what the whole idea of this public hearing is about.
Yes, sir.
When was Academy Place developed?
Academy, it began in the late 90s. I believe the original plat was done in 99.
Was that one of the first PUDs in the town?
It was an early one. I don't believe it was the first one. I believe Mr. Camp had one of the first ones over in the Cotton District.
And of course, with the PUD, we've got an allowable density that's completely negotiable.
Yes, sir. There is a clause in the comprehensive plan that details the maximum densities for each residential land use type. High density is 15 units, and the clause in the comp plan says that under PUDs, higher densities can be obtained. So there's not a maximum. And then the PUD language, in the PUD zoning regulations, there's language that refers to a percentage comparable to adjacent and surrounding properties. So that can go up. In the case of Academy Place, theirs is lower. It's still a PUD, and they have open space requirements. And that's why I calculated the net density for the single-family detached portion, which is contiguous to the subject property, to give y'all an idea of what the net densities were going to be, not what the maximums are.
Okay. Is there an undeveloped commercial 2 plot on Academy Road right now, outside of this property?
An undeveloped
Is there existing
C2?
C2?
I believe there is a small parcel close to where Mr. Jones is building that Old Town Center right now. I believe there's one. There may be 2. If it's 2, it's 2 small ones, or 1 or 2 would be my guess. On the north side of Academy Road, closest to Louisville Street.
Have we conducted any traffic count surveys on Academy Road?
We've not. I believe when, again, going back to site planning issues with the plat from last year, Mr. Kemp had made some recommendations for such, and that was something that I don't want to get too far carried away, Mr. McAlpin, but if that plat had been reviewed, that would have been something that the board at that time would have had to make a decision on and determine what was going to be needed.
I have no further questions. Further queries? Alderman Gore?
Well, I was just going to comment that I do remember when the issue of the Dollar General came up. That was spring 2005, and I wasn't on the board at the time. However, I was sitting in the audience watching the meetings through the course of that, and I remember the objections some of the people had. And then again last year, as a member of the board.
Okay, this sounds a little more like discussion. We need to get through the questions first.
Okay, I'm getting my question.
Okay.
So then I remember a year ago being on the board and having the concern of R3, in fact, voted against it with the idea of coming back with a new zoning, and that was part of your direction, correct?
Yes, sir, it was.
To
And
try to
that's-
address
that
the
was the
concerns.
R3A, and that evolved from that.
Okay.
Further queries? Alderman Carl.
What was your recommendation last year when it was an R3?
I'm sorry,
What was your recommendation last year to the board when it was an R3?
It was for approval, again, based on those zoning changes that were in the area.
Alderman Sistrunk.
And this is a multi-step process, isn't it?
It
This
is.
is simply zoning. The concerns that we all have, and I think they're strong concerns that we all have about drainage, traffic, those sorts of things are addressed at the site plan review.
Yes, ma'am. In this case, it would be at preliminary plat, which this board would review, as well as planning and zoning. And that involves the subdivision of the land, the infrastructure, drainage, water and sewer, obviously. But the other issues, drainage, erosion control, traffic, those issues are addressed as well.
Further queries? Further queries for any of the presenters? Okay, this will conclude the public hearing portion. You certainly may still ask questions of anybody. They'll just be taken without objection from any of you. That's the way a question from somebody not on the board is taken. So now a discussion of the matter before you is in order. And there's a couple of, I guess, housekeeping notes prior to beginning the discussion. This is a little different matter for a number of reasons. First, structurally, this is certainly a matter of policy at the end of the day, but it's not something that the board initiated. This is brought to you by private parties, so you sit in somewhat of a different capacity. The city has previously adopted an ordinance that speaks directly to the process, and of course there is a state statute on the subject as well. The action specifically that y'all will take with respect to the recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Commission is you'll affirm, modify, or reverse the recommendation. I have asked the city attorney to interpret the voting procedure for this because there is a special procedure when more than 20% of the parties within 160 feet of the proposed rezoning change protest, as is the case here. So I'll ask the city attorney to give his interpretation of the number of votes required to sustain the action.
The state statute on zoning requires a supermajority where more than 20% object, as in this case. And the state statute calls the supermajority 3/5 of the vote, and the Attorney General has ruled that means you don't include people who aren't there in part of the 3/5. However, the city of Starkville, in Article 4 of its zoning ordinance, raises the bar to a higher level, requiring more votes, because what it says is this won't pass unless it is upon the favorable vote of 2/3 of all the members of the mayor and board. So my opinion would be that the supermajority required by Starkville zoning ordinance is a 2/3 vote of the board. And math is certainly not my strong suit, but I would say that requires, in this case, 5 out of 7.
Okay. And that's with one accused.
Right, and the big issue on that, where you have a bit of a difference with the state statute, again, clean up for me if I'm wrong, is the state statute actually allows you to adjust your numbers based on recusal, whereas our ordinance appears to require the same number whether all members are present to vote or not.
It's a higher standard.
Yeah.
Which I think you can do.
Basically, what it amounts to is under the state statute, in this case, it would require 4, but under our standard, which is a more stringent guideline, it requires 5.
That's correct.
Okay, and just to summarize again what the specific question is with respect to this matter, the statutes that lay it out, to paraphrase, set out what's called the change or mistake doctrine often for zoning matters. This is not a mistake. So what you are deciding in your role as a Board of Aldermen in the best interest of the public is to decide whether there has been a material change in the character of the land in the area of this proposed zoning change so as to merit the zoning change. With that said, I'll open the floor for discussion on the matter. Alderman Corey.
Well, I'd be ready to go ahead and introduce a motion. Based on what I've heard tonight, and after a lot of consideration, I would go ahead and move approval of P&Z item RZ09-02, request by B&P Developers of Mississippi LLC for a zoning change from C2 to an R3A, located on the south side of Academy Road, east of Hummingbird Lane in Ward 3, based on changing conditions in the area.
Hold on just a second. The the deputy clerk actually takes the minutes, so I've asked her to write these down, and then I'll clarify with you. Okay, so your motion is to, you've moved approval of P and Z item number RZ 0902, a request by the B&P Developers of Mississippi LLC for a zoning change from C2 general business to R3A single family medium density located on the south side of Academy Road east of Hummingbird Lane based on changing conditions to the neighborhood. Is that your motion?
In the area.
In the area, based on changing conditions in the area. Okay.
Is it area or neighborhood?
Area.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Motion has been made and seconded. Alderman Corey, would you like to speak on the merits of your motion? All right, queries. Are there any queries on the motion? Any queries? Seeing none, we'll move into discussion. Discussion on the motion you have before you. Discussion on the motion before you.
I've got a few things I'd like to say.
Alderman Davis.
I know the real issue here is zoning, and I think it's clear that with the people that we trust from planning and zoning to recommend the approval of zoning based on fact and based on a number of things is something that we hold, or that I hold in high regard with the people that we insure with this product. And I will say that having practiced planning, having or studied planning, even research planning and teaching planning, I have an issue that even transcends the fact of changing the character of neighborhood from the standpoint of, I think there's issues of saturation in this market. I think there's other things that really hold merit here, although those do not hold merit in the fact of zoning change. But I will say that I really hold in high regard the idea of our city planner, the fact that P&Z has really looked at this issue in a number of times, and I really trust the opinion of the individuals that I hold in high regard.
Further discussion? Is there any further discussion? Further discussion? Further discussion? Seeing none, we'll now move into a vote on the motion you have before you, which is a motion to approve P&Z item RZ 0902, a request by B&P Developers LLC, or B&P Developers of Mississippi LLC for a zoning change from C2 general business to R3A single family medium density located on the south side of Academy Road east of Hummingbird Lane in Ward 3 based on a change of conditions in the area. Please respond by saying yay, nay, or abstain as the deputy clerk calls your name.
Alderman Carver?
Nay.
Alderman Sistrunk? Reluctantly, yay. Alderman Parker?
He's pretty key.
Beg your pardon. Alderman Corey?
Yay.
Alderman Dumas?
Yay.
Alderman Perkins?
Yay.
Alderman Vaughn?
Yay.
Passes. 6-1, no recusal.
By a vote of 5 in favor with 1 against and 1 recusal, this measure passes. All right, we'll now move back into what was the original order of the agenda, public appearances. We'll give just a second, because it looks like we've got a little bit of traffic, and then we'll reset. I'll tell you what, are y'all ready to keep going, or would y'all like a little break? Okay. Do I have a motion for a quick recess? You what now?
We just stand recess.
Okay, without objection, we'll recess. Okay. 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 Is there any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, we stand in recess. without objection from the board, I'm gonna take care of a quick matter I skipped on the agenda, and that is the approval of the consent agenda. Is there any objection to approval of the consent agenda? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, consent agenda is approved. We're now in public appearances. And our first presentation is the annual report of the American Red Cross from Ms. Becky Wilkes. Ms. Wilkes.
This won't take long, folks. I reside in Mr. Dumas's board, and it's a pleasure to be here and to bring you the report of the Red Cross. You have, or you should have received earlier, a copy of the annual report. And just let me start by saying that the American Red Cross is the nation's largest independent, nonprofit humanitarian organization that helps people to prevent, prepare for, and respond to all types of emergencies. No other entity provides the depth that our organization does, or the depth of services to communities in the U.S. and around the world. Every household in America has benefited in some way from the life-saving mission of the Red Cross. We have a volunteer-led network with 700 plus chapters. In Mississippi, we're down to 14 chapters. We have 36 blood regions, more than 500,000 volunteers. It is a powerful grassroots organization. Every single day, we harness the very best of humanity to carry out their mission in Starkville and in the surrounding area. We serve not only Oktibbeha County and Starkville, but also Webster, Choctaw, and Winston counties. Your money, however, does not benefit those counties. They are paid for, any services we provide in those counties are paid for by the National Red Cross Office, not by your money put forth by people of Oktibbeha County and Starkville. But we basically rely on the generosity and the willingness of people to step up, help us deliver our mission, and to help donate to keep us going. We get no government money except that you give us or that the county designates for us. We are chartered by Congress, but we are not funded by Congress. We are funded by donations. 91 cents of every dollar that goes to the American Red Cross goes to its mission, to humanitarian services and programs. This has been an outstanding year for us. Oktibbeha County Board of Supervisors gave us new office space. That's helped us to reduce our budget by about $10,000. We're in the Old Wind Job Center on Felix Long Drive. Our volunteers have put in untold hours of making it a beautiful office, a pleasure to go to work there. Master gardeners are working with us on the landscaping, and it is going to be a beautiful spot for downtown Starkville. And we very much appreciate that. In addition to that, they increase the allocation they give us. And of course, we're asking you to do the same thing. Another exciting thing that's on our agenda for the coming year, we have received 4 slots from VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America, primarily to work with disaster preparedness. We've filled 2 of those slots, one for Oktibbeha County and one for Webster County. So in August, we will be opening a satellite service center in Eupora, Mississippi, with some help from the Webster County Board of Supervisors. I'll be meeting with their aldermen first week in August to request some support from them for that building too. We're excited about that because that gives us a presence there, and a lot of good things come from that Red Cross presence. You see from your report there that we responded to 32 local disasters, working with 112 people last year. We did 18 disaster education presentations in the community. And let me just interject right there and say thank you to Roger Mann and the City Fire Department for the help they give us in teaching children how to be aware of fires, how to prevent fires, and how to respond to emergencies. We have local volunteers who responded to Hurricane Gustav. We opened a feeding center here in Starkville for Hurricane Ike. We operated for 3 days at First Methodist Church. And we funded that through local donations and local chapter dollars. In our health and safety services, we've trained more than 3,000 people through 283 classes. Your lifeguards at the city pools come through Red Cross certification. First aid, CPR, AED, all of those things that OSHA requires for a business, we supply. First aid, safety training, WEVEX, any of the companies that here rely on us. And we need your support so that we can keep the price of those classes down. We try to keep those classes as cheap as possible to make sure that more people get them. And they're basically cost recovery. But if we have to start charging those to make money on them to keep us afloat, then we're gonna be in trouble. We work with industry, civic groups, school groups, and individuals. And your contribution to our chapter is what allows us to keep our costs reasonable. Our Armed Forces Emergency Services, you see that last year we responded to 30-some odd requests. What Congress requires as part of that charter, when a military person has an emergency and the request that a serviceman come home or service person come home for that emergency, they have to have a Red Cross case number. That means that we have to verify what the emergency is. We're exempt from HIPAA legislation, so the doctors tell us if indeed it's an emergency, what the nature of the emergency is, and whether they recommend the serviceman be released to come home or not. We don't make that decision. The commanding officer makes the decision, but we are the ones who verify that information and convey it then to the military. Every 2 seconds, someone in the U.S. needs blood. We're not a blood unit, but we do cooperate with the blood unit from Birmingham to hold blood drives and to help keep that supply. Red Cross collects and distributes almost half of the nation's blood supply. Another project that we started this year is the coupon clipping, and some of you may have helped us with this. We plan for this to be an ongoing effort for our military folks overseas. What we do is clip coupons from Sunday papers or from magazines or anything, any manufacturer's coupons. The community has been a tremendous support in this. We'll come in some days and there'll be a stack of coupons this high stuck in our door that somebody's dropped by. They can use those in the commissaries at the bases overseas. They don't get the Sunday paper with all those ads in it. They get the Stars and Stripes. So we clip those, send them to the bases. They can use them, they give them then to the service people. So in 1 month, we collect more than $4,000 worth of coupons. So multiply that times 12 months, and you see that we're making a significant impact for the military, whether we know those people or not. We also participate in health fairs, educational programs, other events, a total of 30 this year. We have 230 volunteers. We have 82 people who are trained to deploy to other emergencies. If you are going to be a Red Cross volunteer and deploy to assist with a hurricane or some other emergency, you have to go through a series of training programs and qualify in the Human Resources Division of Red Cross. And we have 82 people from Starkville who have done that. And that makes us the leader in North Mississippi. More people from this chapter, even though it's one of the smaller chapters. So that tells you how concerned your constituents are about Red Cross and how much it means to them to have a vibrant organization here. Questions?
Any questions?
Let me tell you that right now your allocation to us is $5,000 and it needs to double. We get $12,000 from the county plus a place to operate from that they don't charge us for. Surrounding towns get at least double or triple or 4 times what y'all are giving us. It's getting embarrassing, folks. It's time to step up and do more. We don't want to lose our chapter. We know that the economy is tough. We know that giving is down. We've seen that. If you look at your totals on your budget here, you see that we wound up the year in the red. We don't see that getting better the way the economy is unless we have some support from y'all.
Any queries? Thank you, Ms. Will. All right, next we have a presentation by Jamie Mixon from the Starkville Central Neighborhood Foundation on a city street signage program. Ms. Mixon.
Hello, thank you so much for allowing me to speak to you guys tonight. As he said, my name is Jamie Mixon. I'm a Starkville Central Neighborhood Foundation board member. I also live on Greensboro Street, and I'm a professor at the university. I teach graphic design. I'm here tonight to request something that we're excited about. We feel like it's going to have a huge positive impact on Starkville, and for years to come we'll be presenting Starkville in a positive light. We have joined with the Starkville Central Neighborhood Foundation has joined with the Starkville Downtown Merchants Association to undertake a street sign project that would replace the current signs with signs that delineate the different neighborhoods in downtown district. What we are proposing is that we purchase the signs, we make that initial purchase, And we also purchased the replacement signs that we all know, street signs always disappear, and we are considering that and realizing that we would be undertaking those costs as well. What we are requesting from the city is simply labor, and it's the labor to install the street signs. And we actually have a prototype that Arch Pitts did for us, and it's actual size and materials that would be used for the street signs. And what we are proposing, and in fact, this is the one that would represent the Greensboro Historic District. Each of the historic districts, including the downtown district, would have a different symbol, and this symbol comes from the Greensboro Center, the facade of the Greensboro Center, the old hospital. So each neighborhood would have a distinct color as well as a historic detail that would come from the neighborhood. And the signs would vary in size of width, but they would be the same as far as height goes. What we have, we've been talking about this for a while and have done a lot of legwork on this, and it's included in your packet, in your electronic packet, of how many streets are involved. It's 130, and I believe you guys have the street list. It's 136 signs. For their two signs per street. This is a project that actually impacts wards 1, 4, 5, and 7 directly, but we feel like it's something that will have a really positive impact on Starkville. It will create recognition of historic residential and commercial districts within our city. It's a visual cue to visitors outside of Starkville when they're driving through that they've entered into historic district. It can be used to promote walking and driving tours. It's pretty common in other towns. If you do a Google on historic district signs, hundreds and hundreds of towns pop up. This is not an unusual thing that happens. And it just shows that Starkville cares about its historic districts and values the special areas within the city.
Queries? Alderman Corder.
Well, first let me say I think it's great, and I think things like this help to further distinguish communities, neighborhoods, and districts in our community. I'm curious, as far as the logo goes, are you going to the homeowners for those respective neighborhoods, or like how are y'all kind of pitching the idea to the people that it's going to impact?
Yeah, well, actually, the way that we got this was something that J.W. Bruce had come up with for his individual home sign in the Greensboro district. And it came off, he is the one that did that and got that detail off of the Greensboro street, or the Greensboro Center. And what we've done is we have Megan Bean is a foundation member as well, and she's gone out and taken photographs of historic districts in each of the districts. And we are consulting with, I believe Pete Melby has been consulted as far as the Nash Street district goes, and the Overstreet district. We do have a lot of photographs. There are a lot of beautiful Victorian kind of scroll work details. And I'm a graphic designer. I'm donating my services for this. This is something that I'm going to do to create the individual logos that will go on there. But I'm sure there will be much discussion about that. And so that each one is very similar to this. We want them to be distinct, but then also be very consistent style-wise so that they're visually similar.
Alderman Davis.
First off, I think it's great. I think this is directly in line with the way we would like the city to progress, both iconically, wayfinding, etc. I do have one question. Mr. Griffith, is he here? Is this in line with our sign ordinance? Is there anything that we need to worry about as far as that is concerned?
Not generally. We can kind of look at those the same way as we do historic markers, and there's some language in the sign ordinance that allows that. And I know we have a few historic markers that have been put up since the sign was on the table, so it probably in that category.
Surely.
And I have to say, we've spoken with Edward Kemp about this, about just adhering to standards of street signs, and it's reflective material, and the lettering is large enough so that it is readable. We're going to make sure that we adhere to all that, so it's functional and not just pretty, because we want people to be able to find their way around ultimately.
Are we ready to begin this process
We,
right now?
here's the timeline. This is what we would love. We would love action on this tonight. If we had positive action tonight, we believe the first set, and we want to do this by district, by district, by district. The first set would be ready to roll beginning of September. Signs would be ready to install. Beginning of September, we would love for this to be done during football season and be done and finished during the football season, so that we are already affecting all the visitors that come to Starkville, Mississippi, and they can see the distinct neighborhoods.
And you're asking just specifically for labor from the
Labor.
city?
That's right, and we will be funding, the two groups will be funding, we're also looking at perhaps applying for a grant so that we can maintain this and have money to spare as we, each year as we're maintaining these signs and paying for the replacement signs.
Is this
And
just a standard pole?
It is.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
And have you discussed the feasibility of the city providing help with Mr. Kemp?
And just give you a little bit of background about this, we've had requests like this in the past of different homeowners associations or entities wanting to come in and do custom signage in their neighborhood or that type thing. And typically our policy in the past has been, as long as they will agree to maintain them, replace them if they're stolen, fix them if they're broken, and the entity is capable of doing that, as in their homeowners association or some type of entity that, can perpetuate, then typically we didn't have any problems, simply because we don't, in our sign shop, we don't have the capability of creating all these new signs and keeping up with all these different custom signs around town. Way I understand it, these signs would replace the existing white signs with black lettering, white backing, black lettering that's typical around town, and would remain on the city pole there at the intersections. Wouldn't be a problem as far as changing out those signs with our personnel.
I was just wondering if the brackets are compatible as far as.
Yeah, the brackets are compatible because the thickness of the metal is the same.
Arch Pitts actually supplies the county signs, I believe. He's experienced with doing that, so.
Well, I've got another question, Mr. Mayor. And I guess this is to the board and even to Mr. Griffith and Edward. What action can we take in addition to the allowance of appropriate city services to install these? I think one thing we have to be careful of is to allow this, and then I live in Octiball Gardens, somebody from Octiball Gardens want to come in and do signs. Is there appropriate action that we need to make additions to the sign ordinance? And I'm not saying that these become the official sign by any means, but the last thing I want to have is 25 different types of signs across the city.
Well,
this is not in
what is very
opposition of this by any
And what
means.
is really distinct about this is that these are designated historic districts in the downtown historic district, but the three neighborhoods that we're talking about are like federally designated historic districts.
I just asked the city attorney generally about issues that we might want to be apprised of, and he said, this is something we might want to look at the sign ordinance in depth on, just to make sure that we don't get out there and set a precedent, because everything the board does tends to establish precedent. So if we rush into it, while I think most everybody feels this is a good idea, you might have everybody wanting to change the sign on their street, and that could cause problems with the sign ordinance. So just a thought, and the sign ordinance is pretty dense. Alderman Corey.
Well, and let me follow that up then by saying too that I don't think anyone on here wants to discourage you from this, because this is a wonderful project. And I think what it might be worthwhile is considering is maybe having us bring this issue up at our next meeting in 2 weeks, with the idea that between now and then what we would do is check our sign ordinance, see if we need to make any changes to it to accommodate for this request, and then go forward with it. Do you have any?
Yeah.
In the worst case scenario, these signs are so pretty they can start getting stolen. Will y'all have one backup for each, and how many weeks does it take to print in case, a junk?
Well, I think signs are stolen all the time. I think the street department can probably talk to you about that, because, signs are stolen all the time. They are regularly replaced, and we have taken into account that. And, I think that Arch Pitts is already in tune with that with the county, and I think the county probably has the most problem. I can't find a street sign out there. We own some property out there, and we can't tell people how to go out there because there's never a street sign. So I think that that's just a course of what happens with street signs, and that these would not be any harder to make than any other street sign. He's going to be ready to roll with these, because he's got a template of how this is going to work, and didn't have any problem with this one, when we met with him and gave him the artwork for that.
Alderman Parker, did you have a question?
So they are made locally, so.
Yeah, Arch Pitts signs, yes.
Alderman Court?
One other thing that did pop into my head was that if we were to look at this again in 2 weeks, I don't want to delay this any more necessary because I want it to be in time for football season, and I don't want to discourage y'all while we've got a ball rolling on this. But if we look at it in 2 weeks and it looks like, to avoid setting a precedent that might require us to start approving any signs down the line, if we have to look at possible changes, normally changing an ordinance requires 2 public hearings and this whole thorough process. What we might need to look at is a street sign policy. Maybe direct the CAO or someone in the city to kind of devise one for 2 weeks from now. That way we don't have any additional delays. And that's just something the board
So
might.
policy would work.
Policy wouldn't require the additional 2 public hearings beyond.
Further queries? Further queries? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Mixon.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have a presentation by Mr. Jim Gafford of the Sidewalk Committee, actually the chairman of the Sidewalk Committee, and he is going to speak on a recommendation for bike lane stripping on newly paved roadways.
Yes, sir. Mayor, lady and gentlemen of the board, thank you for your time. Point out, I'm the chairman of the Sidewalk Committee. We'll be talking about bike lanes tonight. There may be some misunderstanding about that, but that is within the purpose and objectives of our committee. And the first point I want to make out before I get into this presentation is, due to the timing of what I'm going to present, if you agree with what we present, then we need to take action on it tonight, because this is a striping on recently resurfaced streets. We're only talking about Jackson Street and Montgomery Street tonight. So this is not an encompassing program for the city of Starkville. This is simply targeted for these 2 streets, and we'll get into the reasons why we're doing that as I go through the presentation. What I plan on showing you basically is just going to be why we think this project is needed, what are the realized benefits from what we accomplished. We'll also look at how this compares to our peer communities, and then we'll get into some of the technical items. That's why I have Mr. Kemp here to help with on looking at examples similar to what we're going to propose, as well as look at the scope of the project, design criteria, technical drawings, etc. To lead into this, you may or may not be aware that less than 2 weeks ago, Time Magazine actually published an article entitled "Why Are Southerners So Fat?" And they actually addressed specifically Mississippi. And one of the major points in this article was the fact that Southerners are fat not because of what we eat. There are plenty of places in this country that eat just as poorly as we do. But it's the lack of, and the fact that we have not invested in our transportation infrastructure outside of automotive traffic. So our citizens have limited ability to maneuver through our city except by automobile. So it's not about, does Johnny want to get out and run? It's, does he want to ride his bike to school and do it safely? And that's why we feel that this is needed this time. In addition to improving the health of our community, I think probably the overarching issue is really safety. There's 2 points I want to make on that. There's reams and reams of evidence on this, but cities with higher use of cycling have lower traffic crash rates of all types as compared to cities that have lower cycling usage. And then in addition to that, bike lanes actually create even safer streets as well for not only cyclists, but for motorists and pedestrians. So it actually improves the safety of our streets by having more cyclists, and by having bike lanes actually improves the safety one step further. And I think that's the point we want to make, because we're really not asking you to, we're not trying to promote more cycling, we're trying to promote safety. And that's really what this is about. The cyclists are already present. If you haven't seen them, then I hope you're not driving, because you're going to run them over. There are a couple other things that might, and I won't go through this whole list, but one, this is also in line with the official city policy for a sustainability initiative, and as well as we didn't pull this concept for this the striping proposal for this area out of thin air. This is designed to tie into the existing biking facilities that already exist on University Drive. So it's not like we're just going to be creating bike lanes nowhere. We already have precedent for this, and we plan on tying this in and making it the beginning of a network, if you will. A couple of key points I want to continue to make is, why are we bringing this to you now? Because we have to do this now. If this is about cost, and I know that pretty much anything the city do is going to be about cost, it's probably one of the biggest things we have to be concerned with. It's never going to be cheaper to do this right now. The streets have recently been resurfaced. They have to be restriped. All we're really talking about cost-wise is particularly some signage as well as the paint that will be striped, which is already going to be paid for because we have to put stripes on the road anyway. In addition to that, there may be some concern about impediments to emergency vehicles. 2 points on that are, we're not talking about altering the amount of usable surface on the roadway. The road's going to remain just as wide as it always was. It's just a matter of striping, and cyclists, just like motorized vehicles, are required to yield right of way to emergency vehicles at all times. So I don't see how that can impede emergency vehicles at all. Another thing we'll look at is, I'm sure you might be interested, is where do we stand on this issue compared to peer communities? And specifically, we've only looked at communities that are in the southeast, particularly Southeastern Conference schools, and honestly, we are falling behind. So it may comfort you to know that you won't be setting any kind of, break any ground on this issue. Really what we're talking about doing is just trying to keep up with what our peers are doing. And with that, that's really all I have as far as the need, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Kemp, who'll give us some of the technical details.
Well, I am, as most of you know, the city's staff support for the sidewalk committee, and that's why I'm presenting a little bit more on the technical side tonight. I guess my role in this is to provide you guys a clear and objective opportunity to make a decision, to lay out all the facts, and hopefully let you make an informed decision. This is the proposal for as far as the vicinity map. We're really looking at two roadways, and I should have brought a laser pointer for this. But if you look on the left-hand side first, on the left side of the left picture, that would be Jackson Street. And the blue dots are what I would call a 3-lane striped intersection. That's where you have a left turn lane, usually at a red light or a stoplight. Sometimes it doesn't occur there, but most of the time it will. It goes from just a 2 travel lane each way to a 3-lane turn lane. Let me also point out that there's really 2 things at work here. One is city-funded roadway improvements, and the other is what I call stimulus-funded roadway improvements. So that is the green versus the red. The green is what the city is paid for, and we've already paid. The red is the stimulus-funded project, which is anticipated to start this fall. So Jackson Street is proposed to run from Lampkin Street south to Green Street is where we would stop the striping at this time. And then if the board so chooses, that the stimulus project, when it gets paved, that we would carry it all the way down to Highway 12. MDOT and the Federal Highway has agreed to continue this striping cross-section and proposal, meets their criteria. So we wanted to make sure that those would correlate and coincide, and they will. The right-hand side of the left picture is Montgomery Street, and the proposal for this is, as you can see, that the red section is actually what currently looks like a war zone right now. We're replacing some water lines and storm drain lines right there right now in anticipation of a overlay this fall, and that would be, again, stimulus funded. And then the section from Lampkin to Highway 12 was recently paved, and with city funds. And then continuing on Montgomery on the right-hand side, the city funded to pave all the way down to Yellow Jacket Drive, where this proposal would stop until, again, the stimulus would pick it up and carry it to Loxley Way, and if you so choose, from Lynn Lane down to Academy Road. That section in between the 2 stimulus sections was paved last summer. So it already has striping on the ground. And as Jim mentioned, it's a lot harder to go back and retrofit something that's already there, a lot more expensive. So that's kind of the scope, and we'll come back to that in just a little bit. Design criteria. These are kind of the guiding documents or guiding design guidelines for vehicle travel lanes and bike lanes.
Institute of Transportation Engineers in their publication has recommended a minimum of 10-foot travel lane. And that is on roadways that are 35 miles an hour or less. Now, obviously, you don't want a 10-foot wide on an interstate or a major arterial. But for something slower traffic in the middle of town, it's probably acceptable. And that's what the context-sensitive solutions in walkable communities publication indicates. On the bike lane widths, they also recommend, or the AASHTO, American Association of State Highway Transportation, recommends the minimum width is 5 feet. And MDOT has actually, when we've gone to them with this proposal and asked them would they continue it along the stimulus section, they said that they would. The proposal tonight is actually to take it from a 5 down to a 4.5 foot width, with the allowance of a 3-foot rideable surface. 3-foot rideable surface is the actual amount of asphalt that bicyclists could ride on. So the 3-foot would, the 4.5 foot would include 3 foot of asphalt plus a 1.5 foot of a concrete gutter. And of course, everything would have to coincide with the manual uniform traffic control devices. There's certain guidelines for bike striping and signing. These are just some examples of what other cities are doing. These are specific details that I pulled off some websites. On the left-hand side is Starkville. They have a 10-foot wide collector road is acceptable. On the right-hand side is the city of Chicago. They have also indicated on there 10-foot wide travel lanes, which are highlighted. This is just a photo of what a 10-foot travel lane looks like, and also a 4.5 foot wide bike lane. That's what it looks like. Just give you a visual on that. That's a 29-foot roadway. So this is what it would look like if you chose to do so. And this detail was included in your packet. I know it's a little hard to read. But looking at the cross section, you would have 2 4.5 foot bike lanes. In that 4.5 feet, 1.5 feet of that is in the concrete gutter section. So you would have 3 foot of rideable surface of asphalt. You would have 2 10-foot travel lanes and a 10.5 foot center turn lane. And that's for Jackson Street, again, from Lampkin to Highway 12. It's currently a 3-lane section right now, as you know. Goes through the Overstreet School area, past Gillespie and on down to 12. Montgomery Street, this is the proposal on a typical section. If you so chose to put bike lanes, you would have 2 4.5 foot bike lanes again. 18 inches of that would be a concrete gutter. You'd have 3 foot of rideable surface and 2 11-foot travel lanes. At the intersections, though, we do have specifically at, I think I have the next slide, at Lampkin, Green, Gillespie, and Yellow Jacket, we have a left turn lane. And in those conditions, the bike lane would actually merge into the traffic, and you would use that allowable space for the left-hand turn lane. So you would have, in those conditions where you have to have 3 lanes, you would have a center 10.5 foot turn lane and 2 10.25 shared use travel lanes. This is pretty typical treatment of these type of conditions. These are just some photographs showing that. A lot of times when you do widen it out at intersections for additional turn lanes, the bike lanes simply merge into the existing traffic. Project cost. I know that that's always a big thing. As Jim indicated, we are already striping that. It's simply the additional cost. It's put up some bike lane signage and some bike lane markings in those lanes. We're already putting in the edge stripes. So the cost is pretty minimal when you look at the total project cost. Potential concerns. Like I said, I want to give you guys a very objective overview of this. And of course, with anything the city does, there's liability associated with it. We have not set precedent, but we have done this before with University Drive, and I'll get to that in just a second, show you some photos of that. So there is some liability in this, and I don't want to sugarcoat that. How much liability, I'm not real sure. Maybe the attorney can fill us in a little bit on that. And emergency response vehicles, as Jim said, the cyclists and vehicles are supposed to yield and still provide that, but we are narrowing the lanes, and so that is an issue. And then driver perception, people that are going from a 12 or 13 foot lane down to an 11 or 10 foot lane, may cause people to go a little slower, may cause people to not be very happy that they have less to drive there more. So these are the concerns. I'd like to show you just a few of the examples, bike and travel lanes that we have here in Starkville. This is again the University Drive at Nash Street. This would be what I would call one of those three-way turn lane at intersection conditions. Two 10-foot travel lanes for the travel and turn lane, and 4.5-foot bike lane. This is very similar to what we would have down Jackson Street with 18 inches of that 4.5 in the concrete road. This is another section of University Drive with an 11-foot travel lane and a 5-foot bike lane, and a pretty serious pothole as well. And then this is just showing a view of probably a very narrow condition here in town. This is on Gillespie Street facing east, right there at Montgomery, where we actually have that right turn lane is only probably 9 foot wide and a 9-foot turn lane. Ultimately, I think the choice that the board has to make tonight, if you want to proceed, is the benefit versus cost. Benefits, as Jim has pointed out, versus the cost. And like I said, my intent was to provide you an objective perspective here, and would entertain any questions that this generates at this time.
I'll just have one. Is tonight the night in the timeline? I guess you mentioned that it was tight. Does action need to be taken tonight, or is 2 weeks from now sufficient?
Well, we do have our striping contractor scheduled to start this week. The weather's looking pretty ominous this week. So, but it's probably a 3 or 4 day job in good weather.
But to be safe, it could have an effect on your striping if we held this in abeyance.
Or if you needed more time to mull it over, and it's something you are interested in, I could talk with the contractor about holding off on these two sections until the board can make a comfortable decision either way.
Where's Alderman Davis?
I think in a past life, I had the pleasure of serving as a jury for the Federal Highways National Environmental Awards. And there were 92 awards, or 92 entries, and we chose about 15 across the country. And there were probably 5 or 6 of them that had statistics that directly related to cycling paths, multi-use paths, a number of things. And some of the most creative were the ones who worked within the guidelines of existing right-of-way, where there were extreme right-of-way issues. And so I'm not a transportation professional. I did transportation research, but of those 5, I think this is a perfect example of what the premier cities that we all try to emulate are doing. And so for $1,800, the fact, if any of you have driven down University Drive any number of days and seen and has witnessed the impact of a simple bike lane, do what?
Are you asking a question?
No, I'm not. I'm just making a general statement, and I'm gonna make a question here. Obviously, I think this is a great idea, and I'm trying to get. It's one of my constituents here, so I'm trying to. No humor in that. I apologize. Nonetheless, I guess getting back to Parker's question, if this would have an immediate impact, obviously, and MDOT has given okay for this as far as the stimulus areas in which they have jurisdiction, as far as striping is concerned.
Where their projects would butt up next to ours, they would essentially they would match these
Okay.
logos.
And they're okay with that?
Yes.
And I saw that Roger Mann offered his approval from a fire safety standpoint. And I guess that's a question and a
Yeah,
comment
I mean,
too.
that goes back to the emergency
Right.
response. Roger and I have discussed this project.
And you're comfortable with the standards set forth by these details from a fire standpoint?
Yes, the letter was a result of such a compressed time frame. I kinda got into this a little late, and I just wanted to put something in your packet. If I was gonna err, I wanted to err on the side of safety or caution. I've since looked at it. I am a little concerned with where, Montgomery Street bottlenecks. It gets a little.
Certain contract issues with our auditor, Watkins, Ward, and Stafford. So without objection, I'm going to remove that item from the agenda tonight. Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, just make note that item A under board business has been stricken. Okay, we'll now move into mayor's business. And the first item is a consideration of Brian Patera for the airport board. And this one, as a result of our ordinance and the way the board was crafted in the agreement, unlike other personnel decisions, I make a nomination, and then it's subject to your confirmation. Mr. Patera submitted an application to be appointed to the airport board. I reviewed it and have decided to nominate Mr. Patera for the position. And notice he is here and has been waiting patiently. Would you like to introduce yourself and say a few words?
I'm Brian Patera. Lived in Starkville for the last 10 years. My wife and I, we have 3 children. My wife is from Starkville, and have a passion for flying, but also own my own business, so I understand the business aspect of it, and looking to get involved in the community. And I feel like that's a good way for me to give my time. That's something that I've been good at, and a good asset for the board and for the city and for the airport, and appreciate your consideration.
Any queries for me or Mr. Patera?
Just
Alderman
one.
Corey.
Although I think Mr. Patera is a great candidate, just for thoroughness and out of curiosity, were there any other applicants or letters received?
Actually, no, not at the end. There was one candidate that withdrew an application, so Mr. Patera's was the only one I had by the time I reviewed it. Any queries? Queries for me or Mr. Patera? Any queries? Discussion? And I guess I am recommending that you approve my nomination. That's for you to discuss. Alderman Parker.
I would just speak in support of Brian undoubtedly. I think he would make a good member, and I move that we, I'm not gonna make a motion right now, I'm gonna wait just a second. I'm done.
Okay. Discussion. Discussion. Gosh, I'm parliamentary. Sorry. Discussion. Alderman Parker, do you wish to make a motion?
Yeah, I move that we approve the mayor's appointment of Brian Patera as the airport board representative to fill the term of Anthony Zinni.
Alderman Parker, I have your motion as a motion to approve the appointment of Brian Patera as a George M. Bryant Field Airport Board appointment. Motion to approve Brian Patera as a member of the George M. Bryant Field Airport Board for the term ending on 12/31/2010. Is that your motion?
That's correct.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Alderman Parker, would you like to speak on the merit? Queries? Queries? Seeing none, discussion. Did I hear a question?
Question.
Without objection, we'll now move into a vote on the motion, which I will not reread as it has been sufficiently read. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. This measure clearly passes. Congratulations, Mr. Derrick. All right, next is I have brought a proposal before you on the establishment of a recycling committee that would take a different form from the last one. It's in your packet. Essentially, the way it's laid out is very similar to the way a lot of our committees that are more advisory in nature are laid out, where there would be an appointment made at a later date, and I'm hoping actually to discuss a lot of appointment issues we have in general at the next meeting. So hopefully, if y'all decide to go this direction, we'd look at that at the next meeting. But I'm asking you to review the establishment of this advisory body. And my reason is that the last recycling committee was more legislative in nature. It actually consisted of 3 aldermen. Of course, all 3 of those aldermen are no longer on the board, so that presents issues there. And given the opportunity where something needed to be done, the committee still needs to exist. Thought since we had gotten over the hump on the major legislative issue, which is whether there was going to be a curbside recycling program, it might be appropriate while the program is in its early stages to have an advisory group of citizens concerned with recycling issues to offer candid feedback to the board on how it's working. And of course, much like the sidewalk committee, this committee would be built in with staff support and a board liaison so as to be able to communicate. Queries? Any queries? Any queries?
Would this continue the terms of the past recycling committee at all? Or would this reestablish the terms from this point forward?
This would reestablish, my thought is we would, of course, go through the process of, filling those appointments, beginning at the next meeting. What I'm trying to do, with this is simply establish the, structure. Some of you may not agree with the structure of this new committee. That's okay. The point is, I guess, due to the fact that all of the people who were leading this matter before are no longer here to serve on the committee, something needs to be done fairly soon because we've got this program that's going to be getting off the ground.
So the major difference is the fact that there are no longer 3 Board of Aldermen members, but 1 now.
Right.
With a City of Starkville staff liaison, which I assume was on there previously.
Yeah, and Ms. Boyd, would you like to speak a little bit about how the prior committee functioned?
We had 2 aldermen, Mayor Wiseman, Alderman P.C. McLean was the chairman, Alderman Sumner Davis, they worked together closely, and Alderman Lincoln, I believe, came in as a person that he wasn't nominated from the board. He just came in because he was interested in recycling. Mr. Sherman was there as a liaison for his company, his entity, Starkville Recycling. And other members were made up of the citizens of the community that were interested in recycling.
And let me clarify too. I was by no means trying to change the composition of the citizens on this committee by doing this. So certainly if there are citizens who wish to continue to serve, I would recommend that. Alderman Parker.
I think I would like to see, the recycling aspect, that's what this committee's main function is. I would actually personally like to see it's broaden. If it's going to be a standing committee like that, I'd like to see it broaden its scope to maybe include solid waste, because that is also an integral part of the recycling effort. I mean, those things are done by the same department, and I mean, I would like to see it as a little bigger, not in the, just in the scope of what it handles.
And this gets into, I guess, the broader discussion that I'm hoping to have at some point, and this is maybe not the right time. If this is not well formed enough, I think some of the issues that we were concerned about moving forward immediately on the curbside program, we've resolved. So no need necessarily to take action on this tonight, but to speak to that, if you are to roll it up into a more global departmental issue like that, that is the type task I would be more interested in seeing us have a true legislative committee on that's going to help formulate a broader solid waste policy. What I'm trying to do is get a committee structure in place where I guess we have committees of two different types. More interest group oriented that advise the board on things to be aware of, and things that certainly may turn into policy at some point, and then have a series of legislative committees that would deal with operational issues in the city. And if it was broadened in scope like that, it may have a more legislative function. Alderman Corey.
I kind of find the terminology a little confusing, because all of our committees, with the exception of the budget committee, which is a committee of the whole, have usually either 1 to 3 aldermen, which means that a quorum isn't present, which means no action can really be taken. So anything any of the committees does is brought before this board as a whole, and legislative action, if any, is taken at that point. And I wasn't sure kind of what the thought process was behind that. And to give you an example, the sidewalk committee, which I was the liaison for, is I guess what you would, according to these definitions, considered an advisory committee, yet one of the main actions it did was to bring the sidewalk ordinance, which is legislative, that the board, of course, approved, but only, of course, when it came before us as a whole. I was kind of wondering what your thought process was behind that, and also I was a little concerned because given that we had 3 aldermen interested in it previously and tried to stay active within it, I would hate for having only 1 alderman as liaison to keep any other interested alderman on the board that would also like to help out with the committee from being a part of that process.
Yeah, and certainly up to y'all. If there is interest, I'm not trying to keep an alderman off of the committee by any stretch of the imagination. Speaking to process, I would like y'all to think about this too. I'm just looking for clear channels where there are clear policy issues, where stuff is moving to the forefront of the board agenda, and then more advisory related issues where you have fact gathering and stuff certainly that may turn into policy at some point in time. And if that doesn't seem very well defined, it's because it's not. But that's my goal ultimately, is have process channels.
I've got a comment.
Yeah.
I want to go back to Alderman Parker's comment. When I initially look at the structure and the formation of the committees and commissions of the city, it's, and I know some of them are completely different structures and statutes and other things, it's very confusing. And I think the role that they play is a function of the confusion of their structure, and I think that there's, I would suggest, and I like your idea of moving forward and really looking at that, because I think we need to take a broader picture and a broader snapshot of how these things function as a whole. Whereas, almost to it seems as though some of these commissions and committees have been knee-jerk reactions to problems and complaints over the past years, and we need to look at that so that they have specific functions. There is not the confusion that seems inherent with a lot of them. And so they're similar, the fact that we've got to, well, not to get into details, but I'm not so sure that this isn't something that needs to be considered now so that we can continue the motion forward. so that we can then put in place the proper procedures and standards at a later time when we really have the time to revisit the broader pictures. But I really like Alderman Parker's idea of really looking at a broader perspective, not only from waste, but, you know, we've talked about a number of issues here with sidewalks and striping, and we need broader perspectives there too, so that it's a complete transportation type of study, so that it's a complete waste type of study, so that it's fits into the broader perspective, you know, the perspective that we're moving. So I think this is a good start. But I just wanted to state that I think we really need to re-examine, as a whole, the structure so that it fits the formation as we move forward.
Yep. With that being said, are there any other questions, comments? This has kind of turned into a general discussion on committees. I'm going to pull the specific proposal because I don't think it's right for good discussion right now, and I don't want us to make a bad decision. But is there any more comments on committees in general?
Well, I do, before we pull it, we still have, I think the curbside recycling program is something that needs to start. And I think we need to do whatever we can. I just want to make sure that by pulling this action, we aren't hindering the process.
Let me address that specifically. Where this matter came forward specifically was Ms. Boyd was afraid she was about to be at a standstill moving forward with bag purchase, because up until that point in time, the committee, which was predominantly aldermen, had essentially been formulating the program. And that was where, I guess, the wheels started turning for me. When we have, I guess, the board taking action to move forward with the program, but because of a hitch in the committee process, the person who is actually going to operationalize it, an employee of the city, feels like they can't move, then there's an issue with our process. As it was, we talked about it, and you'll notice there's a proposal from Ms. Boyd to go on and accept bids. So I think we've got that situation where curbside recycling is going to be able to move forward, and we can discuss the committee in a separate light with all of them in August. Further discussion? Okay, seeing none. Consideration of approval of advanced travel, requesting the amount of $464.60. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, and we deleted item A under board business. Item B was altered to read consideration of the adoption of the amended board policy regarding travel by board members and city employees. Floor is open for discussion.
I've got, my original intent with this was to lay out a framework so that all travel, out of state, overnight, etc., within the parameters voted on, $1,000 per department head, $2,000 for mayor, and then anything above that would be board approval. And I need a little guidance here, because if it's my understanding, we have revised this policy stating those changes, but we need clarification on the fact that it includes all travel, out of state and overnight. Is that correct? And so it's just a general, it's just the approval of the amended policy that has been tweaked to match the amendment or the motion of 2 weeks ago.
I'm going to deflect this real quick to the Chief Administrative Officer without objection.
In your packet should be, I have emailed it to you, in your packet
Right here.
should reflect what y'all had intended at the last board meeting, as I understood it, which is to essentially, the cap on travel for department head approval is no greater than 1,000, the cap for the mayor is no greater than 2,000, and that does not, create any restrictions associated with out-of-state or overnight travel.
Okay.
And it is not cumulative in the sense that if the fire chief sends 4 people, it's not that the 4 of them add up to less than $1,000.
person.
Instead, each person does not add up to over $1,000.
think we've got in number 8, I think it does, it goes over the detail of travel inclusive of all costs, i.e. schools, airfare, per diem, et cetera.
Right.
So I think it doesn't address it till 8, but it does
Yeah.
address it.
Do you want to include?
I have no further discussion. What was your question?
Discuss. Did you have?
Yeah, what was your?
Are you including overnight and out of state in number 8?
Yeah, it's all travel. Yeah, and I think that's actually taken into consideration in 1 and 2 from the standpoint of, well, that's Board of Aldermen.
If I may, in number 8, that area that says, extending overnight is stricken. There's a line through that.
Okay, so with that not being stated in 8, then it's assumed that this includes all travel overnight and out of state?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Further discussion. Further discussion. Any further discussion?
I move that we accept this amended travel policy as presented.
Motion has been made by Alderman Dumas to accept the amended travel policy as it is written in your packet. Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
That is my motion.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Alderman Dumas, do you wish to speak on the merit of your motion?
I do not.
Queries? Any queries for Alderman Dumas? Queries? Seeing none, moving to discussion. Discussion on Alderman Dumas's motion. Discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll now move into a vote on Alderman Dumas's motion, which I will not reread because you have it written before you. Please answer yea, nay, or abstain as Deputy Clerk calls your name.
Alderman Carver?
Yay.
Alderman Sistrunk? Yay. Alderman Parker?
Yay.
Alderman Corey?
Yay.
Alderman Dumas?
Yay.
Alderman Perkins?
Nay.
Alderman Vaughn?
Yay.
Passes 6-1.
By a vote of 6 in favor, 1 against, and 0 abstentions, this measure passes. Next item is the consideration of the board appointment to the Visitors and Conventions Bureau in accordance with the enabling legislation of the Visitors Convention Council. Discussion. Alderman Corey.
I'd actually been the one who requested that this be added to our agenda. Members of the board may or may not have been aware, but per legislation, the members of the Board of Aldermen do have one representative that gets to sit on the CVB board and be a part of that, and that is, of course, a subset of the partnership. Previously, Alderman Davis had served in that position, and so with him no longer being a member of this board, I thought it important and prudent for us to go ahead and bring this back before us so that we can try to fill that position as quickly as possible. It's something I know that I personally am interested in because I'm very much interested in economic development and regional economic development, being from Columbus, Mississippi originally. However, if there is anyone else interested in serving on this board, I would certainly, of course, defer to them. But I wanted to just make that known.
Further discussion. Further discussion. A motion to either approve somebody or open the floor for nominations would be in order. Alderman Parker.
After talking to, after looking at what this appointment entails and kind of some of the job duties, I felt I would actually move that we nominate Alderman Dumas for appointment to the CVB board.
Motion has been made to nominate Alderman Dumas for appointment to the visitors to the CVB board. Is that your motion?
That's my motion.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion has been made and seconded. Alderman Parker, would you like to speak on the merit of your motion? Queries. Queries for Alderman Parker. Is there any queries for Alderman Parker? Any queries? Any queries? Seeing none, discussion. Discussion. Any discussion, any discussion, any discussion? Seeing none, we'll now move into a vote on Alderman Parker's motion, which is the appointment of Alderman Dumas to the CVB board. Please signify by saying yea, nay, or abstain when the deputy clerk calls your name.
Alderman Carver?
Yay.
Alderman Sistrunk? Yay. Alderman Parker?
Yay.
Alderman Corey?
Yay.
Alderman Dumas?
Yay.
Alderman Perkins?
Yay.
Alderman Vaughn?
Yay.
Passes 7-0, no abstentions.
By a vote of 7 in favor with 0 against and 0 abstentions, this measure passes.
Thank you.
Next, we have an item that was also amended in the agenda, and that is a consideration of the calling of a public hearing on the amendment to the City of Starkville Code of Ordinances, Chapter 10, Alcoholic Beverages. Discussion.
I'd like to say something, Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Dewey.
This is something that has received a lot of airtime in the past several months since the beginning of the campaign season. And I think a logical next step in this is moving this forward into the public hearing aspect so that we can listen to and hear public comments in regards to this ordinance. So I can't make a motion. So that's my story.
Discussion.
And I'm sticking to it.
Alderman Carver.
I oppose that thought, and I just think that this would be the divisive issue that I think we do need to bring this up before the board, but not within the first 6 months of our term. So I'm against this within the first 6 months of our term, bringing any kind of public hearing in front of us on this matter.
Further discussion. Alderman Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, this matter has surfaced before this board on numerous occasions during my 16 years as a member of this Board of Aldermen. You know, in this city, we have 6 days for those who want to sell and consume alcoholic beverages. Sunday, as I see it, is the Lord's Day. I have many constituents who have expressed that to me. Sunday is the Sabbath day, and Sunday is a day of worship. We need to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. We cannot keep the Sabbath day holy by authorizing the sale of alcoholic beverages on Sunday. You know, as we read the newspapers almost every day, Chief Lindley's department is charged with a very awesome task and responsibility of dealing with crime. I read today's paper. You have a clerk that goes to the bank on a Sunday, and she's robbed trying to take the money to the bank. We have the accident out there by Browning Creek in 2008, DUI-related accident, death involved. We have the case on Mississippi State University campus, death involved. We have a lot of crime. Crime is on the rise here, and we don't need these alcoholic beverages. We do not need to sell whiskey in Starkville on Sundays. Whiskey is not the answer to it. You know, we need to keep a separation of this. You know, if people want to sell whiskey and drink whiskey, they got 6 long days to do it. You know, there are people who have family values in this community. People go out to restaurants on Sundays and they have their children, and they want to eat and dine and fellowship with their families and relatives in a whiskey and a beer and a wine-free environment. Last Friday, as we sat here, we heard a report from our municipal judge, the Honorable Rodney Favor. We also heard from the court administrator. And there's a fact that stayed with me, and that fact is they say that the city of Starkville has more DUI arrests than any other municipality in the state of Mississippi, including Jackson. Every time we open the newspaper, the police department arrested someone, student out there dealing with alcohol over the past several days. You know, and also the municipal judge said in 2006, there were 343 DUI arrests in the city of Starkville. 2007, there was 424 DUI arrests. 2008, we had 401 DUI arrests. It is my opinion that this proposal to move this matter forward is not about economic development. You know, some may say that, but you know, it is my opinion that that is nothing more than a smoke screen. I think that we're not going to see that much more revenue with the sell alcohol on Sundays. If you sell alcohol on Sundays, you're going to have more DUI arrests. You're going to have more crime. We're going to need more police protection. You might as well face it. I mean, you might as well face it. All these things are going to increase. You know, we're going to have more incidents. We're going to have more disturbances. And it is my proposal that, you know, there are more pressing issues here in this community. You know, we need to discuss things like devoting our time to things like infrastructure upgrades. Where are we going to get money from to build a municipal justice complex? Where are we going to get money to do more streets and ditches? That's what the people in my wards is talking about. They're talking about better roads, better streets. And, you know, some say that, you know, that this is a new day in Starkville. It may be a new day, but I want you to know for sure that Sunday is the Lord's Day. You know, and if we focus on that for Sundays, there's plenty of biblical word that we can get within us. There are 66 books in the Bible, and you know, and I believe in the Bible. And I think, you know, that if you know, the Lord created this world, He created this earth. You know, His grace is so good. He is so worthy to be praised, and you know, He does all those things for us, and we cannot give Him one day. I mean, this town is not going to dry up if we forbid the sale of alcoholic beverages on Sundays. You know, we give them the extended hours. You know, they have the extended hours on Friday nights. They have the extended hours on Saturday nights. Whenever there's going to be an MSU home football game, they get the extended hours then. You know, enough is enough. This proposal is not going to promote the public health, safety, and morals in this community. So I would urge my colleagues, you know, this is not popularity. I'm not saying that anyone's seeking any publicity from this, but this is going to be a divisive issue, like the gentleman from Ward 1 said. You know, there are a lot of church people who have already spoken to me on this matter. And I told them, preaching to the preacher, I'm already convinced. No, this is not going to make our town any better. No, we don't need to say we're one of the first municipalities in this area or this, you know, or in this locale, or whatever the situation may be, to sell alcoholic beverages on Sunday. We don't need that. This is not good for our community. And this is not good for kids who are going to be out on Sundays in these restaurants to be sitting at the table in their Sunday clothes, and you have to smell all this alcoholic beverages, regardless of the hours. We don't need that. If someone wants to consume alcoholic beverages on Sunday, they got 6 days to get it. Buy it on Saturday. Save it, preserve it. No, we don't need to do it 6 months from now. We don't need to do it at all. You know, one thing we need to do is to do what is in the best interest of our city. And that's what we need to do. You know, and that's what I told my constituents. If you elect me and send me up here, I'm going to speak as to what I think is right. If I got to sit here from 1 to 9 or 1 to midnight or whatever time, and I'm certainly not up here for my health. And I'm up here to try to make a positive difference. If you approve this matter tonight, if a motion is made, then it's going to be one step closer to home plate. If you approve it, it's more than likely it's gonna pass. And what's gonna happen when we have a public hearing, if the case is like it has been in the past, you have more people to come up here and say, yeah, we want to have, the law changed, so we have Sunday whiskey sale, or whatever you wanna call it. And then the board gonna say, well, we heard more in favor than not. Let's approve it. And this poll that the Starkville News is taking is not scientific. What is probably happening is more people who are interested in Sunday whiskey or beer or light wines just call into the newspaper and they got the numbers up. That's how that works. So let's not approve this now, because if you approve this measure that's on the agenda, it's going to put us one step closer to selling whiskey on the Lord's Day. God don't like that. He does not want that. He wants you to worship him on his day. Whether you attend church or not, it is the Lord's day. This is his earth, his world, and his creation. So I'm going to urge you to defeat any motion up here tonight to set a public hearing, because all this public hearing is just another step to get us across home plate. If you do that, you might as well go ahead and authorize Police Chief Lennon some more police officers. You're going to need some more DUI officers. There's going to be crime. There's going to be more bag snatching, more rapes, more robberies, whiskey stores being robbed in this town, stores being robbed. Every time you turn around, somebody's being robbed. Breaking in cars out there out toward the university. You know, it's all they're doing, spending time trying to solve crime. We need to find ways to reduce this crime, to cut this crime out. So I urge you all to defeat any proposal that may come up tonight for a public hearing. And I tell you that voting for this is not the right thing to do. So, Mr. Mayor, I yield the floor, and I urge my colleagues in a very respectful way to vote against any measure that will call for a public hearing on this matter. Thank you.
Further discussion. Alderman Sistrum.
I'd like to make just a couple of points. First, to the issue of DUIs, I don't think that the number of DUIs is necessarily indicative that we drink more here in Starkville than other communities. I think Chief Lindley would be among the first to say that we're very aggressive in pursuing those kind of illegal or identifying and ticketing those types of illegal activities. Other communities may not take as stringent an approach to it. As far as a business development issue, when we were at the Mississippi Municipal League conference last week, I had an opportunity to talk to people from Flowood, Mississippi, and as you know, they've just recently passed a provision to allow the sale of alcoholic beverages in Flowood. I was interested to hear them say that had they passed that early in the development of the growth that's happened out at Dogwood Festival in those areas in Flowood, that the businesses that would have come to that area would have been very different, and not just restaurants. They don't have a Dillard's in that part of Flowood. They have a Dillard's in North Jackson at County Line Road. Dillard's wouldn't come to Flowood at that without the alcoholic sales, because they said a community that didn't have alcoholic sales wouldn't support an upscale shopping experience, and so they wouldn't come into the community. So there is a business development component, and that's an anecdotal story, and I realize that that's anecdotal, but I'm using that because that's going to lead into my next point, which is that both Mr. Carver and Mr. Perkins are right. This is an issue that has the potential to be very divisive for our community. It's incumbent upon us as the Board of Aldermen to set the tone for how we discuss this. I'd like for us to discuss it in a fashion that is informed and reasoned, and not one that makes any sort of moral judgments or makes any sort of emotional plea for a vote one way or another.
Further discussion.
I'd like to say something.
Alderman Dewey.
I want to echo Alder Lady Sistrunk's ideas of economic development, and this is by no means a smokescreen. I've had the opportunity in planning activities, and I keep going back to this, but this is a new day for Starkville. not only is it a new day for Starkville, but I listen to my constituents as well as constituents across this town. And when you look at the true economic impacts of not tax revenues, but the ideas associated with being a progressive community and the resulting economic development from that, we at the university, we as the city have been working hand in hand in trying to produce a convention center. And one thing that has become an issue associated with that is the idea of fairness associated with resort status, other types of things that are realities when you look at the daily operations of convention centers, other type things. And that's just one example. I think it's completely unfair to assume some blanketed increase in crime. These are unproven tactics. There's documented research associated with this, both from a DUI standpoint, both from other things that we are prepared, the city is prepared, and other interest groups associated with this are prepared to present in a timely manner. That's why I'm moving this to the session so that we can have the dialogue that Ms. Sistrom is interested in having. So that it is an educational, it is an informed aspect so that the facts are presented in a timely manner. Because this is something that's a real issue. We aren't the first municipality. If you look at the 3 municipalities in the Golden Triangle, we're the only municipality in the Golden Triangle that does not allow Sunday sales. So if you want to get to the realities of DUIs, think about the students who are leaving here on Sunday, going to Columbus, going to West Point, having to go to Cowbells, and then drive back into town after having to drive that distance to have a drink. That's the reality of being a student. It happens. So when these aspects really come into play, we have to look at the facts and not the emotional, moral issues associated with this, because it is a community-centered activity.
Alderman Ball.
Mr. Mayor, to Brother Dumas and the rest of the board, we can't forget what we was elected for. And we promised that our peoples that in our ward that we were going to serve them. And we said we were going to serve the city of Starkville. Because our constituents telling us this is what they want. What about the rest of the people in Starkville? We got to keep in mind why we're here. We're not here for us. We're here for the city of Starkville and the ward that we to serve. No, I disagree with it. And that's the way I'm going to vote. That's the way I stand. And I think we should leave this alone.
Further discussion.
But I have a general response.
Alderman Devlin.
Where then does the idea of public hearing come into that? I mean, if we really want to understand, then would it not be prudent to move this to the public hearing aspect so that we as the city can then hear the comments of not only the constituents that are calling me or you, but hear it here, so that we can then make the informed decision, not from our personal standpoint, but what's presented in this room.
Further discussion. Alderman Carver.
Introduction to Alderman Dumas's comment. I've been hearing that a lot too about of the Golden Triangle, we're the only municipality that doesn't serve Sunday alcohol, or doesn't have Sunday alcohol stuff. But with that, you got to realize that in the census data will show this is they're losing population at the same time that we're gaining population. So obviously, we're drawing some of the Columbus people and some of the West Point people. And by no means do I want to compare ourselves to West Point and Columbus. I chose to live here for a reason. I think that of the 3, we are a progressive town and a clean town, for lack of terminology, but I don't know that's a fair justification to compare us to West Point and Columbus, because like obviously we're doing something right where our population is growing annually and they are losing population.
Further discussion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we authorize to hold a public hearing in accordance with the city's public hearing policy on the amendment of City of Starkville Code of Ordinance. Article 10, alcohol beverages.
Alderman Dumas, is your motion a motion to authorize a public hearing in accordance with the city's public hearing policy on the amendment of the City of Starkville's Code of Ordinances, Article 10, alcoholic beverages. Is that your motion?
That is my motion.
Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor, can I be recognized at the proper time?
Yes, let me call for the second on this.
All right, no problem.
And yeah, and just to clarify, this thing's kind of moving now. This is one of those reasons, that I asked for the motion at a specific time. Once the second is asked for, then Alderman Dumas will be able to speak on the merits, and then we'll move into discussion.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Alderman Dumas, would you like to speak on the merits of your motion?
No, we're not.
All right, are there any queries for Alderman Dumas? Any queries? Any queries for Alderman Dumas? Alderman Corr, in regards to his motion.
So is there not going to be a date specified in that?
Those, when we close on a race, when he recognized me.
Yes. I move that, in addition to that
You can
motion,
friendly amend your own.
let's set the first public hearing date for the first Board of Aldermen meeting in August. The second public hearing being the recessed meeting of that meeting, which would then be the third week of August.
Okay. And are you making this as an amendment to a friendly amendment to your own
Yes.
motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Alderman Dumas has amended his motion to state that the date for such hearings will be the first meeting in August and the recess meeting of August.
Right.
And the second meeting will be at the recess meeting of August.
That is correct.
Any queries? Any further queries? Any further queries? Seeing none, we'll move into discussion. Discussion on Alderman Dumas's motion. Discussion on Alderman Dumas's motion. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll now move into a vote on Alderman Dumas's motion, which is to authorize a public hearing in accordance with the city's public hearing policy on the amendment of Starkville's Code of Ordinances, Article 10, alcoholic beverages. Such hearings will be held. The first of such meetings will be held at the first meeting in August, and the second meeting will be held at the recess meeting in August. Please answer yea, nay, or abstain when the deputy clerk calls your name.
Alderman Carver?
Nay.
Alderman Sistrunk? Yay. Alderman Parker?
Yay.
Alderman Corey?
Yay.
Alderman Dumas?
Yay.
Alderman Perkins?
Nay.
Alderman Vaughn?
Nay.
Passes 4-3.
By a vote of 4 in favor with 3 against and 0 abstentions, this measure passes.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Burke.
will you please ensure that there's proper public dissemination about this public hearing?
Yes. Yes. All right, our next order of business is the item that was initially the second item under Building Codes and Planning Department, the consideration to approve P&Z item number CU 0901, a request by Mr. Mitch Mitchell to allow a residential use in C2 General Business Zone located at 508 University Drive in Ward 4. Mr. Griffin.
Mayor and Board, the next item is CU 09-01, which is a request by Mr. Mitch Mitchell to allow residential use in the C2 General Business Zoning District. The subject property is located at 508 University Drive in Ward 4. The property is commonly known as the Blue Marlin and was originally built and used as a single-family residential structure. It has since been used for commercial purposes, most recently as a beauty salon. The applicant would like to make minor interior renovations and return the structure to residential use. He proposes to maintain the structure as a single-family dwelling unit and has stated that he does not intend to enlarge the structure, nor will he subdivide it into separate apartments. The property has an existing paved off-street parking area, which more than accommodates the minimum requirement of 3 parking spaces for single-family dwellings of more than 1,000 square feet. Planning staff recommended 7 conditions, including 1 to remove an existing pole sign at the northwestern corner of the property in order to maintain the residential character of the site. The Planning and Zoning Commission questioned whether or not the city's definition of family would apply to the applicant's request, and a memo has been provided with your packet addressing the issue. Planning Office received no calls regarding the conditional use, and the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously recommended approval with the 7 conditions recommended and the inclusion of the recommendation that the Mayor and Board of Aldermen address the definition of family for clarification.
Are there any queries for Mr. Griffith? Any queries? Any queries for Mr. Griffith? Seeing none, we'll move into discussion on the matter you have before you. Any discussion, Alderman Corey?
I'm very familiar with the building, and I do believe based on layout, available parking, and other factors, it's probably one of the best chances to get maximum use out of that particular piece of property. And when the discussion is over, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Further discussion? Further discussion?
We were asked to possibly address the issue of definition of family, and is that something we discussed now?
Yes. Certainly is in order. And, Mr. Griffith, would you like to speak in any more depth on it?
Well, Mayor and Board, I provided a memo. I guess the recommendation of the board was whether it applied in this specific instance. My conclusion was that it does not, because the property is zoned C2 commercial. It's being used as a single-family dwelling unit. The definition of a family, I feel, and the city attorney has concurred, and also our previous city attorney had raised the issue as well. It's not in a single-family zoning district. Had that been the case, it would have been a little bit different. But in this particular situation, we feel like that it doesn't, it should not apply.
Alderman Davis.
How do we as a, obviously this is probably an issue that's, I'm just assuming, has this been brought up before outside of this one instance as being a university town?
It's brought up quite often, and I mentioned in the memo for code enforcement reasons. It's also been brought up recently regarding platting of property in R1 zoning districts, which are single family, with the intent of using the property for rental purposes. And the question that was raised, and I believe I detailed, not so much the definition of unrelated family members as it was a nonprofit household unit. In other words, even though a family, mom and dad and 2 kids lived in the house, it would be a rental property for profit for the property owner. So it was more leaning in that direction as opposed to what's the definition of a family and how many unrelated family member or unrelated persons can live in a household.
Is R2 and above, obviously R3A, we decided that earlier, but are all the rest of those, do they all have multifamily designations within allowable uses?
They can allow, the R2 can allow duplexes by conditional use. R3 can allow up to 4plexes by right.
So R1 is the only one with an unallowable use of multifamily.
R1 and R3A and R4A, which are low, medium, and high density residential zoning classifications.
Okay.
We have one for each.
Further discussion? Further discussion? There is no pending motion.
I've got another question. How would you suggest we move on this family issue? Is this something that obviously we're here to request the zoning change?
It's a conditional use.
Or conditional use, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
But is this something we need to move forward on fairly quickly in the standpoint of really defining the allowable uses in those?
It's going to come up, again, not as a planning and zoning or issue. It's going to come up as a code enforcement issue because students are going to be coming back. They're obviously going to rent a house in a neighborhood. Mr. Dumas, I know in your ward you're going to probably get some complaints. Mr. Carver, you're going to get another one. Ms. Sistrunk, y'all three are probably going to get the most complaints because you're in established single-family neighborhoods, and that's the question that I'll get posed as we have a family definition of a family, and you're not enforcing it.
Right.
And the previous city attorney had cautioned me not to enforce it because of the unconstitutionality of that, and Mr. McAlpin can probably expand on that a lot more and a lot better than I ever would be able to.
Mr. Mayor,
There's a string of cases a yard long about this very thing, and courts are very dubious about restricting people who are not related by blood, marriage, or adoption from living in certain areas. So I think if it were tested, the city would probably not prevail, but I think that in the context of this application for conditional use, you don't have to deal with it. But at some point, you probably need to look at it after some serious legal research and advice from your new city attorney.
good.
Is there any purpose that the definition serves other than, I guess, the preserving neighborhood character? Does it serve a purpose like defining single family within zoning use?
I think you were on the right track with the preserving the integrity of single family neighborhoods, and when Judge Favor was city attorney, he had emphasized that as well. We had actually had a plat that came up which was withdrawn, or else the previous board would have probably had to take some action on it. And I'm certain that sooner or later we'll have another one that will come up, just like Alderman Dumas was referring to.
So in the future, if it's eliminated altogether, is it a threat to anything from a zoning standpoint?
If the definition were eliminated?
Yeah.
Is a threat? No.
Does it hamper anything you do currently?
I don't think it would. It still raises the issues in certain wards, obviously, like I just mentioned, about rental properties in established single-family neighborhoods. Some of the issues, and I think I addressed a couple of them in the memo, were issues that are really more problem with the tenants that are there as opposed to the actual use of the properties. And I know that's kind of a fine line, but it's the noise, traffic, trash, not the actual use of the property. Because like I was explaining earlier, mom and dad and 2 kids could rent a house and they meet the definition of a family. However, there's the question of that nonprofit household unit. So the definition's a little, it's a little strange. So I don't know if that's something that we would need to address. Again, that's a policy decision that this board would probably need to direct myself and the city attorney to look into and research in the future. I don't know that, like Mr. McAlpin said, with the city attorney, especially because like I used the example of the plat that came up and was withdrawn. At some point in the future, we'll probably have another one come up, and I'd rather be proactive than having a reactive situation. I'd rather try to address it when it's not staring us in the face.
Yeah, just a general thought. If it's unenforceable and the constitutionality of it poses serious issues, then it only creates confusion and dilutes the effect of other laws when we have it on the book, because we should be able to enforce what we have.
Yes.
Further discussion.
I move that we allow the residential conditional use in C2 zone located at 504 University Drive,
508.
or 508 University Drive, with the 7 conditions stated by the P&Z board.
Second.
Parker, that
Hold
includes,
on 1 second.
that includes the following of that.
Okay, motion has been made by Alderman Dumas to approve P and Z item number CU0901, a request by Mr. Mitch Mitchell to allow residential use in a C2 general business zone located at 508 University Drive in Ward 4 with the 7 conditions stated by the Planning and Zoning Board as written in the packet. Is that your motion?
That is my
Alderman
motion.
Dumas? Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Alderman Dumas, would you like to speak on the merits?
I would not.
Are there any queries? Any queries? Seeing none, we'll move into discussion. Discussion. Question's been called. Is there any objection? Seeing none, we'll now move into a vote. On the motion, which I will not reread as it was just read, please answer yea, nay, or abstain as Deputy Clerk calls your name.
Alderman Carver?
Yay.
Alderman Sistrunk? Yay. Alderman Parker?
Yay.
Alderman Corey?
Yay.
Alderman Dumas?
Yay.
Alderman Perkins? Alderman Vaughn?
Yay.
Passes 7-0, no abstention.
By a vote of 7 in favor with 0 abstention, with 0 against. Yeah. So you can vote on. Ms. Outlaw.
The claims docket for, the fire department has been, these are claims that were reported to the clerk's office, and, accounts payable clerk has gone through and verified the accuracy, and, the fire department's total claims were $19,795.31, and I recommend that this board approve those.
Any queries? Queries from Ms. Outlaw? Any queries? Seeing none, we'll move into discussion. Alderman Corey.
I'd like to move approval.
Alderman Corey has moved approval of the City of Starkville claims docket for the fire department claims as of July 18th, 2009. Alderman Corey, is that your motion? Is there a second? Motion's been made and seconded. Alderman Corey, you wish to speak on the merits?
No.
Are there any queries? Any queries? Seeing none, we'll move into discussion. Seeing none, we'll move into a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. This measure passes. Thank you, Ms. Outlaw. All right, y'all want to keep going or quick break? Keep going. All right. Next item is a request for approval of a construction change order in the amount of $25,827.23 for an upgrade of the roof for the new Starkville Electric Department office building from an asphalt shingle roof to a commercial metal roof. Mr. Hadley.
Mayor and Board, we were charged by the previous board to make this building as leads qualified as we could, pending, the funds that we had available to us to do the work. At the time that we initially started this, we did start out with a shingle roof, and as we've gone into our next budget, our new budget, as of July 1, we have funds appropriated to be able to do this work, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Cosper, the architect.
With the metal roof, we get an additional lead point, which will help us. I cannot promise that it will guarantee us, but it will help us achieve LEED Silver certification. It will also give us a more durable, longer-lasting roof, a more weather-resistant roof, and frankly, it'll be the roof that's the right look for the facility. So we think for all these reasons that this upgrade would enhance the building, keeping in mind that the roof, of course, is a prime point of vulnerability of any building, and maintenance of a roof is an important issue over time. So we think this upgrade would, greatly enhance the electric department building.
And with this roof, with this metal type roof on the facility, it will give us quite a few years of use before it would have to be replaced. We feel like this is a good deal for the use on the building, and we're requesting that the board authorize this change order.
Are there any queries for Mr. Hadaway and Mr. Costa?
Mr. Hadaway, then the money's available for this, right?
Yes, sir, it is.
Mr. Mayor, may I be recognized for a motion?
Proceed.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the construction change orders requested by the manager of the Electric Department in the amount of $25,827.23 for an upgrade of the roof for the new Starkville Electric Department office building from an asphalt shingle roof to a commercial metal roof.
Second.
Motion has been made to,
Request
to approve the construction change order in the amount of $25,827.23 for an upgrade of the roof for the new Starkville Electric Department office from an asphalt shingle roof to a commercial metal roof.
Yes,
Alderman
correct.
Perkins,
Yes,
that's
sir.
your motion.
Yes, sir.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Alderman Perkins, you wish to speak on the merit of your motion?
No, sir, ready to vote.
Are there any queries for Alderman Perkins? Any queries? Any queries? Seeing none, we'll move into discussion. Discussion?
Call the question.
Question's been called. Any objection to moving into vote? Any objection? Seeing none, we'll now move into a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. This measure passes.
Mr. Mayor, I have to again recuse myself from the fire department.
Yes. We'll give Alderman Carver a moment to leave the room before considering the next request from the fire department. First item from the fire department is request for educational leave for Roosevelt Harris and Jerome Clark to travel to Emmitsburg, Maryland, August 3rd through 14th, 2009 to attend Interpersonal Dynamics Fire Service Organization class at the National Fire Academy for a total cost of $464.40. Chief Matt?
Mayor and Board, this is some of our personal and developmental classes for leadership bring to you for your consideration.
Queries for Chief Matt? Queries? Queries? Seeing none, discussion?
I move that we request the educational leave as stated.
Motion's been made to request educational leave as stated on the packet. Is that your motion, Alderman Dumas?
Yes.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Alderman Dumas, you wish to speak on the merits of your motion?
No.
Or any queries for Alderman Dumas? Any queries? Seeing none, discussion. Question's been moved without objection. We'll now move into a vote. Please signify by saying aye if you approve the motion.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. This measure passes. Next request is a request for educational leave for Todd Palmer, Jeff Whitehead, Sam Wilkes, and Trent Helms to travel to Pearl, Mississippi, August 3rd through 13th, 2009 to attend the Fire Officer class, the 1021 class at Mississippi State Fire Academy for a total cost of $2,752.
So moved.
Motion has been made.
Okay, somebody make a motion.
Motion has been made to adopt the request as written. Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
That is.
Do I hear a second? Motion's been made and seconded. Alderman Dumas, you wish to speak to the merits of your motion? Are there any queries? Any queries? Seeing none, we'll move into discussion. Seeing none, we'll now move into a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. This measure carries.
Thank you.
Next item for consideration is a closed session to determine whether we need to move into executive session. So we'll ask that those of you remaining clear the room for a moment while we determine if there's a need for executive session. Chief Administrative Officer has a couple of items that she would like to. Excuse me, we need a motion to move into closed session. To determine the need for executive session.
Mr. Mayor, I motion that we move to a closed session to determine the need of a.
Alderman Vaughn has made a motion to move into a closed session to determine the need for an executive session. Alderman Vaughn, is that your motion?
That's my motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Alderman Vaughn, you wish to speak on merit?
No.
Queries, discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by nay. This measure carries. We're in a closed session.
If I may, there is nothing in pending litigation at this point in time. We do, however, have a personnel matter that Mr. Floyd has requested to provide you information in package on, and does require some action by the board if it so chooses.
I move we move into executive session
We've,
to discuss personnel matters.
Motion has been made to move into executive session to discuss personnel matters. Is that sufficient?
Yes.
Okay.
second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Alderman Parker, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No.
Queries, discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
We'll now move into executive session for the
What
purpose.
session would you go into in executive session?
We're in executive session now.
Oh, okay.
Do we need to go announce the
Executive
call?
session. Tell what you were going into executive session for, and then whatever. Y'all want to, well, the issue before you is a personnel matter for, some interest payments that the, individual requested. Mr. Boyd is outside, as is the applicant, if you will, and he would like to speak to the board if he's, interested in his presentation.
What's, yeah, I guess, yeah. I was gonna ask a question, I can ask him.
Shall I?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, we need to make sure the camera's on.
Is the red on?